Hello, everyone. Welcome back to OTD Military History. Kicking off the new year. It is now 2025. I don't know about you, but 2024 went by pretty fast. Feels like it was just yesterday we were doing this for 2024. So it feels like it was quite the quick year. So today I'm just going to kind of do a quick overview of last year and kind of what I did, and then talking about the channel a little bit and talking about some future stuff that I'm kicking around some ideas. Let's see how that goes. And then, of course, as always, always open to questions and anything like that, comments about anything, history, me, channel, anything like that. So I was just going through the videos for 2024, and I'm sure for those of you who've been with us for a long time, it's not a surprise that 2024 was a lot of Normandy stuff. Obviously, that I did that on purpose. I was trying to take advantage of the 80th anniversary of the Normandy landings and the battle that went through June through August into September 44. I visited there in the spring of 2024, so I got tons of footage, the majority of which was of the Canadian sites, which was obviously my plan, to try and cover them all, or as best as possible. I have still footage of others that I haven't made the videos yet, but I'll get to that in a bit. But yeah, I covered all the big ones. Covered Juno Beach extensively. Still missing a part of it that I'd like to do a little bit better on. But yeah, I got all that covered. The fighting moving inland, which was very important to me, particularly that early fighting in early June. So that was great to visit Bretteville and all of those locations again and learn some new stuff and learn some new locations and some new info about the fighting in that area, particularly the tank battles that took place, which I haven't been able to, sit down and spend the time I want to on that one to really get into those details of that, tank battle of those that are aware on the June 9th there outside Bretteville, which is a quick but intense fight, but it's full of detail and lots of things to dig into. So yeah, there's a lot of Normandy. Again, not a surprise. Tons of stuff. Some pretty good reactions. The views aren't exactly what I wanted them to be. I was hoping to do better. The channel has done better. In some ways, it's improved. That was the point of doing the Normandy stuff, was to try and get a theme going, try to get some direction and cover some stories that had never been covered, trying to bring some new information. Things like some of the 12th SS massacres that don't really get any attention at all outside some academic work, hardly anything in the public sphere. Some other smaller places that I think are just fascinating, some points in the Falaise pocket that I don't think get as much attention, that are just great places to visit in general. So I tried to do a lot of that. Some videos did better than others. Like I did a video on 1 Charlie, the AVRE that now just sits outside the landing outside Juno Beach there. That did really, really well. People really loved that. So that was fantastic. Did an intense video on the HLI in Normandy, just outside Caen there on July 9th at Biron. Didn't get to cover the ground like I would have liked because I was focused on other parts, but the video opportunity came up afterwards, so I was able to do that. That video did extremely well, so I was really happy with that one and got some support from the now Association for the HLI, which has amalgamated with another battalion here in Canada. So that was great. And just some few other things, but mostly Canadian Normandy stuff. Wandered to the lesser parts, I think, of Omaha Beach as well. A lot of you know that's what I try to do, is cover stories that don't get attention, or maybe kind of on the periphery of other stories, and just get a quick mention or mistold or whatever. And it's great to be able to do that. But yeah, lots of good stuff 2024. Still some stuff from Normandy that's missing. I'm just doing a quick run through here. Yeah, quite a bit. It took up a lot of my time in early 2024 because I was doing a ton of research, because I wanted to get those little nitty-gritty details that you don't see in the travel guides and all that kind of stuff, and the standard stories and things like that. And I was able to do that. Like, I was able to find tons of details, particularly about, unfortunately, those Canadians that were all murdered, in different spots in the investigations, and kind of give those soldiers as well, along with the Abbaye Ardennes, that's very well known. Give them their their due. Cover the first Canadian Parachute Battalion, their landing zone as well, which was great to see. Unfortunately, it's private property, so it is not as much as I could have done. But yeah, it took up a lot of attention. I can just look at the videos here. There's not much in January, Feb of 2024. I did one on the first Special Service Force at Angelo to kind of line up with the anniversary. So that was cool too, as well, to be able to look at that in depth and look at a unit that gets to talked about a ton, but not, and I did a presentation on World War II TV as well on the same thing, is looking at this well-known unit, but it's not for the well-known stuff, right? Like they're known for the mountain climbing and all that stuff. But no one talks about really their time in the line at Anzio was basically front line infantry. So that's kind of what I wanted to cover. And it's also how they got their name. So I thought that was really cool to do, but that was pretty much it. Quite a few live streams. I didn't do the numbers, but it looks like there might have been more in 2024. See, Norma's here. She asked, I think, yesterday to have more guests, and we'll talk about that in a bit as well. Some thoughts I'm kicking around as well for that. But yeah, it was very Normandy centric. And thanks. Where do you go? From James, thank you. I appreciate that. More will be coming. I just got to find the time to get that rest together. But lots of good stuff. Getting to visit people in Normandy as well is great. And I would go back if I could. But yeah, so that was a lot of that. A lot of live streams. Sorry, just looking at a bunch here. Yeah, there's a ton here. We did some more theme weeks back in 2023 and 2022. They're just harder to organize, I think, to do weeks and things like that. But takes a lot of work and interested in seeing some new work. Some well-known people like Tim Cook was on the channel finally. Some people have done their first work, all that good stuff. So trying to keep that going, trying to catch as much of that as we can. It just takes a lot of time and more effort than it may seem on the outside to do. But it takes a lot of effort to get those going and to find the time to do it, to be honest. Yeah, so it's great to have more of those coming up and trying to engage more with the channel, period. So 2024 overall, I think was a good year for the channel. I mean, objectively, the numbers are just better because I was also just doing more. So that was a good thing. The views were up, not the type of views I would have liked, though. I learned a lesson way too late about, and most of you might not even engage with this part of YouTube, is the shorts. YouTube is really pushing those for people to do, compete with TikTok and the like. So I leaned heavily into that, and I think that was a mistake because now I have a ton of subscribers, right? I'm over 26 something. And most of those don't even come close to ever engaging with the long form, which was what I need for the channel to survive, basically, again. But we can talk about that moving forward. So yeah, that's just kind of a look back there. Some of the shorts did really, really well. Some of the long form is still doing really, really well, which is great to see. Controversial topics, obviously, that I don't shy away from, you guys know. But also just trying to get that attention. Sorry, just 1 second. So yeah, so 2024 was good. Got to go to Normandy, visited Italy as well with my wife, which was fantastic. Wish I got to go to Ortona, which I'm still sitting on a ton of footage as well. Great place to visit. Loved going there. Ortona was great. It's just a bit harder to get to than the other major Italian cities, just because it's not really on the beaten path that people go to. But I do recommend going if you can. And driving is the biggest takeaway I have for going to Ortona is you got to pretty much drive yourself there from Pescara or from one of the major cities in the area, because Ortona is just, it has a train, but there's no other public transportation that's really easily to use. But I do recommend it. Great town. Not busy. Maybe more so in the summer because it's kind of a beach town. But lots of great stuff. And just a great city it's been rebuilt, but it's kind of got that stereotypical Italian look. Not that that's a bad thing. And yeah, so visit some other places, the standard touristy things in Italy, which probably some of them wouldn't want to do again, but hit some other places as well. And, I didn't get to go to Monte Cassino or anything like that. I just went by it on the train. But yeah, some other places went through the Leary Valley, which is a beautiful area. But again, that was just on the train. So didn't get to do a lot of that. So 2024, yeah, was busy work-wise as well. Working on a project with the Hong Kong Veterans Associations, let you know. that's taken up a huge chunk of time, getting that going and trying to figure out the methodology of a project that's never been done before. So that was really interesting, and that's still ongoing through the rest into 2025. We're finding good stuff in there. I've been doing tons of work with the RCAF Foundation, trying to get that presence growing as well, and getting aviation and then the RCAF better known in Canada, and what that offers to the country and how that helps us. So yeah, I've been a ton of that, tons of client work as always. So yeah, 2024 is now I'm thinking about it pretty busy. So it was nice to have a little bit of a break over the last little while. I've been gone since 20th or something like that of December, kind of taking a break and doing bits of work here and there. But yeah, so it was a good year in a lot of ways. Hoping the channel does a little bit different coming forward into 2025. But yeah, so I guess the year ahead we can talk about as well. If you have any questions about 2024, I'll answer them too if you like, or anything about what I've done in the past or stuff you liked and want to see again or similar or whatever, fire away. So 2025, I don't have any real solid plans, to be completely honest with everybody, because like last year, I made the plan to go to Normandy around June 2023 because I knew it was going to take some time to get everything together and figure it all out and get some funding together and all that good stuff. So I just haven't really planned anything for 2025. Like I don't have a plan to go to Europe for VE Day, none of that stuff. I did the VE Day in 2022 or 2023, I think. So that was cool to see. I've done it, but I don't have any plans to go back for the foreseeable future. I'm going to be going to the East Coast, so I'm going to go to Halifax, which is great. So I'll get some footage there as much as I can of the Citadel and of HMCS Sackville, right? The last surviving Corvette ever from World War II. See World War II service is still there. And I'm going in the summer. So it should be easily accessible, lots to see. I mean, as we know, they're not very big, but it's still going to be great to see that and the Citadel and other things in Halifax, right? Halifax is quite an old city. Especially by Canadian standards, it's got lots of cool stuff. So I'll grab what I can. Maybe some other places on the East Coast. We haven't really nailed down the itinerary yet, but definitely Halifax for sure. So because we fly out of there, so we're definitely going there. So and hopefully get to the waterfront for quite a bit because there's just lots of good stuff there, and the military history of Halifax, right, is obviously extensive and lots of cool stuff. So yeah, other than that, not much else planned. Yes, there's not too much I can do around where I am, right, without going quite a distance. I mean, for good, Ottawa doesn't have a ton of military sites in and of itself, right? There's a couple of 1812 sites within driving distance, right? Yeah, Chrysler's Farm, which I've done. The Battle of the Windmill, which is a funky little one. The windmill's still there. I've done that a couple times, so you can see those videos as well. But it's harder to just get to other places. Like I'd love one day to maybe, I don't know, it's kind of a reach goal. I think I said it for last year. Yeah, to do Plains of Abraham and maybe some of the other battles that took place in Quebec or just outside, which is now still Quebec. Anyway, yeah, so the walls are still there. And the planes have changed, but they're still there. It's still a park. But yeah, maybe we'll see. Maybe that's a thing for the fall. I don't know. But yeah, I'm always open to suggestions if I can make it feasible and all that good stuff. But one of the more tangible things I do have planned for 2025 and still in trying to get some stuff down is live streams and with others, right? I know a lot of people really love those and covering all kinds of topics, right? We're military history here, right? I know it's Canadian focused or has been in the past. That's one of my big goals this year. Is not to move away from the Canadian stuff. That's not necessarily my goal. My goal is to expand and do more. I want to get more people engaged. I want to get more topics engaged, different subjects that you really don't see anywhere else, right? You don't see a ton of the smaller niche subjects, except for maybe like World War II TV, right? With Woody, but he's World War II focused, right? So he gets those stories. I want to try and do that for others. And give other people opportunities to share their work, right? We don't do enough of that in the history field, I find, especially with the public history divide, public academic divide. There's no real coming together there. I feel like I'm in a position to give a bridge, having both worlds, worked in both extensively as well. So I think I can kind of provide that bridge and get some other people on here that I maybe never even heard of, talking about subjects you might tangentially know or heard of once, and kind of get those. So that's something I'll need help with, right? Is keep doing those and to make them work. I just need support to watch them, right? You gotta watch them, it's live, watch it after, particularly after the numbers are not as great as I would like after. They're still pretty good live, but afterwards it's not doing as good. So I'd love that. So I can definitely expand that and beyond my 20th century specialty, right? Because that's just what I know the best, and those are the people I know. So I got to, start digging, start reaching out, start talking to people, get some ideas, see who's available, who's willing, who isn't. Hear stories, but you never know until you try, right? So I'm going to try, start reaching out to as many people as I can. If people got new work coming out, and if you ever find anything new or that looks cool, whatever, just let me know. There's lots of ways to get in touch with me. You can also just leave random comments places, and I do see them. So that's always a good thing. And I'm always open to suggestions. So that's something I'm interested in doing. James, I've already done it. I think it was one of the early seasons, because they do it in seasons. Talked about Vimy Ridge. I was trying to cover a big topic. I don't think they weren't they're good numbers. I haven't looked at it in a long time. I don't know their publicly available numbers on mine, but I've already done it. I've already been on. It was years ago. I have been thinking about going on again. If I can ask those guys to go back on, that would be awesome, because they just do such a great job, and they just get such good people on there. It's always just great to be associated with others, just not even from a publicity part, but that obviously helps, but just to be part of a community in one way or another and share history is always, as you know, great to do. So yeah, I'm going to probably reach out to them. I'm going to try and reach out to others, get on some more, because I did more of that in 2023, and early 2024 was being on other people's stuff. I'd love to kind of expand maybe that way, be on some other people's stuff, because there's just lots of good stuff out there to be on, and great people, and their same goal of sharing history and doing it right, and building community and having us all stay together, which is obviously, as you know, a huge part of why I do this is the community, and something I cherish so much. So that's a big plan. 2025, right? So we've got the anniversaries, the 80th anniversaries of things that happened in 45, which there is an extensive amount, obviously. I was thinking about this yesterday. All the big things, I'm interested in looking at, right? We have Operation Veritable anniversary coming up in just over a month, which is a fascinating place. I've been there, into the Rhineland and all the Canadian battles, the crossing of the Rhine, right, for Operation Plunder as well, which is the logical conclusion of Operation Veritable and Grenade from the Americans, which is also something I'd love to talk about, is Operation Grenade, because you get Veritable, but you don't necessarily get Grenade. So I'd love to get into that with the U.S. Ninth Army and Simpson, who doesn't get hardly any attention, but I think there's somebody working on him now, which is fantastic. Maybe I can get him on. Varsity, right? Norma's also right. Varsity, fantastic story. Lots of great stories, a lot of sad stories as well, right? All airborne operations are extremely dangerous. But Varsity is no different. It's a victory, unlike the other one. Unlike Operation Market Garden, Varsity works to a T, almost. I've been to that ground as well. I mean, it's not visually striking like some of the other battlefields out there, but it's a farm field. First Camp Harris, LZ or DZ, sorry, was a farmer's field with a wooded hill next to it, which it still is today. At least it was in 2022. Or 2023. I can never remember when I went on. I went on the trip a while ago to the Netherlands and Germany, which was a great area to go to. Loved it. Nijmegen and through the Rhinelands and all those battle sites. Fantastic place to go if you ever get a chance. Highly recommend it. So that's something I'm looking forward to covering. Is Rhineland, moving through, push across the Rhine. The liberation of the Netherlands is obviously massive here in Canada and in the Netherlands, obviously. Did some stuff already on the Hunger Winter, which is heartbreaking, nothing but heartbreaking, that story. The food reliefs, the food drops with Operation Chownhound from the Americans and Manna from the British Canadians, and then the road food deliveries, which were literally handing over food to Dutch truck drivers under the watch of the Germans, and a ceasefire was put in place, not just for the planes, but yeah. So it's a sad time, but it's a fantastic story to tell, and something the Dutch do a fantastic job of remembering in intense detail. We do as well here in a number of ways, and Alex is bringing up one of them, which is here in Ottawa, is the Tulip Festival. It's a general thank you for the Canadian liberation of the Netherlands indirectly. It's more to do with the birth of Princess Marguerite, actually, in Ottawa, because the Canadian government sheltered the Dutch royal family during the war. So Princess Marguerite was born in Ottawa Civic Hospital, which still stands. The room is still there. It was declared extraterritorial, so not anything, that one particular room, so she could be born under the Dutch, whatever the rules, laws, and be a Dutch citizen instead of a Canadian one being just born in Canada. So they've been forever grateful, and they send tons of tulips. It's massive, it's busy, covers most of the city. Most of it's down in the park at Dow's Lake. If you've ever been here or know that, you can look that up too. It's part of the Rideau Canal, so it's kind of artificial, but it's massive around there. And to your question, Alex, I'll answer this now. There's not much to cover. I've been. It's fun. It's busy though. It's always busy. I'm not really sure how to cover it, to be honest. Not in a mean way. It's a lot of tulips. Not my thing, right? I don't know how to do that. The military part is almost non-existent, discussed. To be honest with you, maybe more so this year because it's the 80th, but you don't see a ton. There's booths and stuff, but they're for more like local businesses and community outreach and things like that, but hardly anything to discuss the reason for the festival. I mean, a little bit. There's permanent plaques down there at Dow's Lake, and there's a statue that has a identical one in the Netherlands. I think it's in, I'm not sure where it is, to be honest. One of the Dutch cities I haven't been to, so it's one of the few. I can't remember them off the top of my head. It's the one with the hats, 2 hats or something. If somebody can look that up, that'd be great. But yeah, there's one here in Ottawa, one in the Netherlands. But other than that, there's just not much to cover. I could go take some pictures, maybe some quick video. It's just, I don't think it's something that I do, right? I don't know how to cover gardens. I'm sure there are people that do, but yeah, it's an interesting one. And if you're here in the area, I do recommend going. It's fantastic. It's just super busy, so you got to plan well. But other than that, it's super busy. So yeah, and 45, obviously moving through that stuff in Europe, and then I have my interest also obviously in the Pacific, Okinawa, Iwo Jima's coming up, all that good stuff, covering the end of the war in the Pacific, and then there's going to be inevitable, I'm sure, discussions of the end of the war and all that good stuff. I have a couple ideas of what I want to look at for that, but that will be summer 2025. Obviously, it's a controversial subject with controversial books and nonstop discussion of what happened and why and who and all that stuff. So that's something I think I'll wade into a little bit because I've done some work on that in the past, and I think I know the literature pretty well. There's a ton of it out there. Some of it's just downright bonkers, but yeah. So then we move through to the end of the war, and then I don't know after that. Just keep doing stuff, the stuff that looks interesting or stuff I find and all of that. But yeah, as I always do, I'll share. If I'm trying to come up with a more of a solid plan to share with patrons and YouTube channel members and things like that, it's hard because my schedule is not set for other work, right? So things change and new projects come up and deadlines shift and all that good stuff. So I have to keep that in mind as well. So I try to keep it to an area and see what we can come up with and some stuff. Had some good ideas over the last couple of days about some really interesting videos that I will be doing. It's just going to take some work because they're quite extensive, and I got a plan to make them to do well on YouTube and all that stuff, right? Because that's the name of the game. But yeah, nothing else. But if people have ideas for things that are related to 2025, any interesting anniversaries coming up and things like that. But still want to do World War II stuff, right? Because that's what I know, and it's still topical, and it's going to be getting attention, right? Like the Battle of the Bulge just got tons of attention just now, still now, because of the anniversary and all of that. But yeah, there's lots still going on, and there's always going to be tons of topics to cover. I think, was it Scott up here said Cold War is an open subject. In a lot of ways it is. Um, there's not as much discussion about it as there could be. I mean, I think we've discussed the reasons for that and why that is, and people were getting tired of war and want to move on. But yeah, there's tons of stuff in the Cold War that's untouched, and there's quite a few Canadian controversies actually that are hardly discussed or not discussed in a level-headed manner, I guess you could say, like the Arrow. That one gets talked to ad nauseum, but no one really ever seems to want to go below the surface, so to speak. Yeah, so I don't know. It's something I can definitely I am thinking about, and how I'm looking at it and what it can do, right? Because a lot of that stuff is still not open. It's not as easy to get to stuff related to Cold War. Not like the Second World War and the First, anything before that, right? There's stuff, but it's not as the same. It's not as much as open, and the information requests is just, again, not as easy as they are with the Second World War, because it was just so long ago. But yeah, and of course, as it's riling up again with a certain country that's similar, things might be changed again. So it's hard to do that. But yeah, it's a great idea, and there's lots I want to do. And I know, Scott, you mentioned the Royal Canadian Navy and the connection to the Cuban Missile Crisis and Canada's early 60s look at things and its involvement of what's going on and all that stuff. And there is work being done on that, and some stuff I do want to take a look at, because I do have some interesting questions that I haven't found answers to yet. But again, it's just, there's always so much to go, and as you guys know, it's just me. There's nobody else. And I have to work other work too, right? So there's only so much I can do, and I got to do stuff that's going to be popular as well, because I still have bills to pay. But yeah, so that's a good one. Yeah, Haida is something I grew up in London, Ontario. For those who don't know, it's only about less than 2 hours away from Hamilton, where Haida is, which is a tribal destroyer. And it's only open in the summer as well, I believe, spring, summer. Canadian winters are no fun. I've never been. I know it's a bit of an oversight, and that's bad on me. I don't think I'm going to Gander, because we're not going to Newfoundland. And of course, Gander's not the easiest to get to begin with, being on the middle of the island. But yeah, that is on the list for, like, in the future, just me personally, to go to Newfoundland and see all those sites, St. John's and Gander and Botwood, because of the connection to the Royal Rifles, right, who fought in Hong Kong. They were there for an extensive period of time. So that was something I'd like to look at and see. And of course, it's just a great place to visit. The Newfoundlanders are great people, and to visit Newfoundland as well is connections to things like the First World War. And that just reminded me, I will be working on something for Beaumont and Mel for 2025. I mean, I use the caribou from Beaumont and Mel as the logo for OTD, and I've never done anything extensively. That's been a bit on purpose, because I want to do it right. I don't want to just do the same thing over and over again that other people have done, right? They went over the top on the second wave, didn't go well, quote the number, who didn't report for roll call the next morning. I don't want to just do that. I want to look at it. I'm still thinking of ideas. I'm still trying to get some concepts of it. I virtually walked the ground in my head. I wish I could go back. I want to do the World War I sites again properly, do kind of a Normandy thing I did for them, maybe at some time in the future. We'll see. That's kind of my next big goal. I don't know when that will be. That's a big reach project, is kind of cover the Western Front and kind of the OTD style, right? Bringing the primary military research that I have been trained to do and that I do, bring that in and then connect it to the ground and the stories that you hear all the time, and make this as a part of that, because there's so much about the First World War, Canada, Britain, all of it, right? There's tons of American involvement that I think is poorly covered. Just straight up say it. Americans are getting better at it. I think there's just so many stories there that just aren't told and could be told, and all that stuff. And there's some French sites I haven't seen. I've never gone to South as Verdun, which would be great to do. But yeah, just kicking some ideas for now. I might have to just stay domestic for 2025, but we'll see. Yeah, so that's kind of what I'm thinking there. Of course, any questions, fire away. I will get moving through questions we've done. All right, questions that have been asked. Actually, no, before we do, I'd like to move and just say a quick thing again. This one's more of a YouTube specific thing about what I've been seeing lately from others. Apparently, it's not like this directly affects me. It just makes me worried for the future a little bit. I've seen a lot of bigger history creators are having issues with getting sponsorships. Apparently, the return on investments for the sponsors is dwindling. So they're pulling out of these campaigns. So they are not getting as many funding as they used to get. They're struggling in that area a lot. A lot of bigger channels are hurting, apparently, which makes me worried because I'm pretty small. I've only had one sponsorship that went through. I get offers. They're scams, unfortunately, so I don't do them. Scams for me and scams products. So that's not going to happen. I'm never going to do that. So the only thing that concerns me is, and power to them, and if that's what they do, that's what they got to do. That's what they got to do, is reaching out and community support. A lot of them have now shifted to that model where they, go hard at Patreon and trying to get YouTube channel members and everything like that. And it just feels like there's a limited pie, and I get a small piece of it already, and it might be shrinking because it's just people don't have money these days, and we're heading towards a lot of economic uncertainty with certain events that are about to take place this month. So that's a concern of mine, is what that's going to look like in the future, because this thing has to pay for itself. That's just the name of the game. I can't keep it up otherwise. I know people keep telling me just do it as a hobby. I'm not going to. I've discussed this before. I can't do this just as a hobby. It's not within me to do that. I've thought long and hard about that. And if I can't do this properly, I won't do it. So that's my final thoughts on that. If I can't do it properly, I won't do it. So if anyone can support already, I know most of you already are, which is fantastic. Thank you. If you can tell others, please do. It helps a lot. The word of mouth from others really helps. There's links to Patreon in the description below. You can always, super chats are always super helpful. All that good stuff. And Patreon, I am going to try and ramp up more stuff there too, because I also have a lot of stuff that I'm working on, and quite frankly, it's not quote unquote fit for public consumption, right? It's military history. There's more stuff being put in place YouTube, more stuff's getting restricted, monetization, and we've discussed how it's not even necessarily about the money, it's just the reach goes down to nothing when it's demonetized and it's age restricted and just nobody sees it. So what's the point? There's tons of stuff that I've got. I mean, it's war. It's not pretty. It's not meant to be, right? That won't work on YouTube. It just won't. So I'm trying to do that other places. I'm trying to do that with Patreon specifically because it's got the support I need technology-wise to do that. So yeah, lots of thinking in that area. Lots of stuff I want to share that I think we need to do history. If you're going to do military history, you need to do it right. And the way it's done in the public, sometimes you can't. It's just, you can't have, photos of dead bodies and museum exhibits all over the place because of kids and things like that. People just don't want to see that. But yeah, so that's how I can go about doing this, is getting more support in that way. If you think my work is worth it and worth continuing, that is how that's going to have to go. But yeah, that's how I've just been thinking about that, and then kind of come to that final decision, is that if I can't do it properly, I won't do it. And old videos will live on here as long as there's a YouTube. But yeah, so we'll just push forward we can into 2025. So yeah, so I'll get going on questions now. If you guys have any others, fire away. Anything, fire away. I got time today, so I'll answer anything I'm able to do so. Well, that's a good question from Alex here. What was the best new to me history book this year? That's a good question. I read a ton on Normandy, obviously, trying to get ready. Old, new. So there's a lot of good stuff there. I don't think I read anything like that was released this year or for the anniversary. So it wasn't really that. Tim's new book was actually really good. I had him on the channel and everything, but I did really enjoy that book because Tim Cook is an excellent writer. He writes such an engaging style that it just keeps you literally wanting to read more. It was really, really well written. Looking at a subject, because I talked to him about it, and it was written before certain events occurred in down south. So I think it's become more important, like we were kind of talking about on the live stream there, of how this relationship between Canada and the U.S. is even becoming more important. Is it going to change? We don't know, but in the past it has worked, even though not everything is always going smoothly. Just something we need to continue, which might not happen, but that one was me, because I literally finished it the night of the election. So I was like stuck in my brain. So it's hard not to think about that one for 2024. I don't even remember, honestly, half the ones I read for 2024. I just read a lot. I read a ton. And it's just that one stuck in my brain because I guess recency effect and events. So yeah, so that one's a good one. Some of the Normandy books I wasn't able to get to in the past, like hold on, I still have tons of books on my desk because I'm sure others who do history work here know of. One that I did really like, it's not new, but was on the 4th Armored Division. I talked about it a little bit, I think, on another live stream about, and it's by, Angelo Caravaggio. This one's really good. I'll put a link down below after. But this one's really, really good. I really enjoyed it because it's a divisional look. It's the 4th Armored, so that's a division that comes later to Normandy and it has a key role, right? Because it's 2nd Armored Brigade up until 4th Armored shows up. They play a key role in the end, right? Fillets and pushing south and encircling the Germans. And there's controversy about that. And, Kitching gets, the commander of 4th Armored gets fired for that in a lot of ways and blaming. And it's kind of a repeat Canadian story in that way, shifting blame and all that good stuff. But I think it just looks at it in a different way and brings a different perspective and helps us understand it from personal perspective in terms of what leadership affects down, right? Because we think about, we can talk, ad nauseum about generals as much as we like, but if we don't understand what it does down, then it's really just, I don't know, a pub discussion that doesn't really have a purpose. Talking about this general's great, this general is not, that doesn't really help us much anymore because everyone's stuck in their opinions anyway. So it's good to look at a division in a different way. And some of their sites are just not known. Like I went to one and it was fascinating. I don't know how it's not better visited because it's one of the few actually defeats of the Canadians as they push south with Operation Tractable. Tractable's hugely successful. This one part of the advance doesn't go well, and it's because of the geography and some mistakes were made. As happens, but yeah, hopefully that answers your question, Alex. Tim's book is pretty good. I can maybe look through some of the other ones I have. There's just so many, and I'm having a brain block because I just read a lot this year, a ton, old, new, good, bad, and everything. Yes, I know. I don't know him personally, but I've used his work. I didn't know he was still there, so that's good. I can reach out to him. I used his work for a project I did with the Canadian War Museum last year. That's for an upcoming exhibit that's a bit in the future yet still. Looking at, the Alaska Highway and the Northwest Staging Route, which is connected to the Alaska Highway, and so many fascinating stories about that stuff. Jeez, it was a tough slog. The Americans and their nasty ways of segregation threw a bunch of African American units up there, and thinking then some sort of cosmic joke that they would freeze and just treat them poorly, and they did fantastic work, adapted no problem, and did amazing work, and got along well with the local communities and the Canadians and the the civilians working there. There were some issues, obviously, as there always is, but it's a fascinating story. And Canada's North has an intense military history, from prehistory through to today, with all these things of small warfare that we don't probably know too much about because it's from a long time ago, right through today, right, with places like Canadian Forces Station Alert, right, which is watching the Russians still. There's still people there permanently, and some harrowing stories of planes crashing there and some rescue missions. And it's just a wide gambit of stuff that we don't talk about because that's just the Canadian way. As we've discussed ad nauseum here, we don't discuss our stuff as well as we could or should. Okay, so from Andreas, thanks again. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to skip Alex here. 45 election. Yeah, there's election coming. Yeah, it's a fascinating story. I mean, it has impacts through Canada today that a lot of people have no clue that is what happened. And it's fascinating with the discourse, and that's using that overboard. As that word's overused, but especially the things we're still discussing today, which we shouldn't be, but we are, come back to that. And we didn't have a GI Bill. We had a series of legislation that was de facto the same thing. It's just, in my opinion, far more successful here in Canada than it was in the United States. Numbers obviously play a role, but there was a government willingness at the time. I think we've slacked off since then, and it only lasted a short period, but to do it right. And they did in a lot of ways. Some misses. Hong Kong vets I talked about before was a huge miss. They didn't treat them as well as they should have. So that's a fascinating one to look at, and how King was able to pull another rabbit out of his hat in social legislation to win again, because he's just never wanted to give up power and did whatever he needed to do. Again, fascinating figure. But yeah, it's going to be a contentious election up here as well. It's already getting nasty as per usual, but it's a fascinating election for sure. And Tim Cook talks about it in his The Fight for History, which I've discussed on the channel as well, which is one of his best books in my opinion. I put that like top 3 for sure, about how the wars were remembered because of the period immediately following it and what was taken out of that war. It was in a lot of lines with Jonathan Fennell's book, right? On what's the title of it again? I should wear my glasses. Fighting the People's War, I think it's what it's called. Same idea, what are they fighting for? What's the point of it all? Social changes after the war. Same sort of idea. So that's a fascinating period, and people tend to forget that nowadays as part of the whole culture war, fighting over, stupid things. But yeah, that's definitely something to keep in mind coming up. Yeah, the zombie army is another fascinating one as well. Talking about conscription, obviously, is what this is. That's the conscripts in the Second World War in Canada. People think Canada didn't have conscription, which is just not true. They had conscription as of June 1940, and it lasted through to the end of the war. It was for home service initially. That's why people just forget, because they didn't really have any effect on them, which is not true. Massive amounts of people were conscripted. People who would later go on to, as they said, go regular was the kind of or go active, was the slang. People don't talk about it because there's a lot of kind of negative connotation with being a conscript in Canada. It's a bad thing. In the States and Britain, it was the norm in other countries. Here, it's a bad word. So if you were a conscript, you were a slacker and you didn't do your part. Whereas there's lots of people who never did anything. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. But yeah, it's a complicated topic. There's tons of things to dig into. I don't know how well it would do on a platform like YouTube, but it's extensive, and it's a ton of political fights. There's a plebiscite and 2 conscription crises, and casualties are taken. Conscripts are killed. Conscripts win military medals. All that stuff. So it just covers the gambit, like the First World War with conscription there. I bought some books over the holidays or just before about some conscription stuff, so I can maybe do an overview of conscription, maybe compare and contrast both wars. Again, still kicking some ideas around there. But it's something I'm fascinated in. To me, conscription in Canada is endlessly fascinating because it's one of those taboo subjects we don't talk about, or people just don't know about because it was taboo in the day, and it just kind of died off. Yeah, but it's definitely something I can keep in mind for 2025. Sorry, Norma, I don't know what this is. Gerda, what is this? Gerda, I never pronounce things correctly. Gerda Mussinger? Sorry, 1 second. Eastern. Oh, yes. Okay, yeah. Which reminds me also of Grzinko, which is something I could do, actually. That just gave me an idea. I should probably write this down. It's something I've wanted to do in a long time. I just never did it. And I think this would be cool. I'm just going to write this down, is because I live in Ottawa, right? That's where the Grzinko affair took place. For those who don't know, I will talk about it extensively another time. And then we have on the channel, right? He was a Soviet cipher clerk who basically defected with a bunch of documents proving a spy ring within Canada and the United States. In a lot of ways, it kicked off a lot of the Cold War anger. This is the best way to put it. Making it real, quote unquote, for a lot of people. So this all took place in Ottawa. The Russian embassy is still in the same location. I think it was the same building, actually. I can't remember when they did they tore down the old building, built a new one. I'm not sure when that took place. But anyway, it's the same location as it was where Grzinko literally walked on foot He wandered downtown Ottawa trying to get people to believe him about the story. Nobody would believe him. They thought he was just crazy. He went to 2 newspapers. He went to the RCMP. Nobody believed him. So he went to his apartment, which still exists. It's still people living in it, actually. So I was going to do that. I'm going to see where he went and kind of try to track that down. And because this happens in September 45. So that would be a good one to do. Well, the sites are still there. And it's he covered a distance doing this with the NKVD looking for him. And this is how they knew it was real, because they thought he was just some crazy guy, but okay, maybe it's real. They put 2 RCMP officers in a car in the park across the street, which still is there. And they watched the NKVD ransack the apartment. So that's when they knew something was up. And they believed him and brought him into protective custody, took him to Camp X in the GTA. And then you kind of go from there. And he wrote a book on it, several other books, and we went on TV a ton, and then died of a heart attack sometime in the 60s, I believe. But anyway, crazy story. Love to cover that one in detail, especially with the sites being right here. Just going to have to wait for the weather to get a bit better to cover those and try to give an idea of what it was like at the time, because September in Ottawa can be a bit warm. Completely agree, Alex. It was the right thing to do. Yes, it had an impact on Canadian aviation. A lot of people wrongfully claim that it killed Canadian aviation, which is not even true at all. Still Canadian aviation today. So that's the point. That's the idea, right? It didn't kill it if it's still around. Yeah, people left. People did leave. Would they have been here without it anyway? I don't know. But yeah, I mean, they went to the States, so I mean, we get outnumbered anyway. So Nolan, thank you for joining us. I don't know if you have in the past, but thank you. That's a good question. So what Nolan's talking about here is often called for 1968 is when it begins, or roughly begins in 67, is all the branches of the Canadian military came together. I don't mean in like they're working together. They were together. They no longer existed. There was no Canadian Army. Technically, there still isn't. It's a whole thing. It's a lot to do with literally semantics and things like that. Things were changed name-wise, but a lot of stuff is still integrated in the same way. There's still central control of most of the things, because it doesn't need to be done in triplicate. There's no points. We're 40 million people. It's not a lot of people. We don't need 3 things of the same thing of all this stuff. A lot of that's integrated. So what it did is it basically undid it. It would bring, helicopter pilots together with infantry, and they'd work together. The Navy was gone. It would all integrate. There was land, air, and it was done geographically in a lot of ways. It was changed a bunch. It's a complicated topic. It's one of those ones you gotta have to dig in a lot with unification, as it's often called. And it caused a lot of controversy. Lost a lot of people, resigned or retired because they didn't like it, because it was undoing the identity, particularly of the services and what they had gained in the Second World War. And the history of it all was kind of done away with in a lot of ways. And done as a cost-saving measure. Pierre Trudeau was complicated. He obviously doesn't get the best rap in the media today, now particularly that he's dead. Yes, he was not, I don't say he was hostile to the Canadian military. That's not right. But he didn't think it needed to be as big as it was. The handling was bungled. And it's still a controversial topic today. So I haven't really touched on it yet. It's complicated. It's a lot of layers. Not the easiest, but maybe that's something I can look at for sure. Maybe in the long run. But yeah, there's a ton of that. I mean, it happened. It went on this day. went official today. January 1, 1968. Crazy stories, and then they basically had to undo a lot of it because a lot of people were very upset, and it wasn't working as they had hoped, and it went on through several administrations here in Canada, and it took a long time to fix some of the problems. Some of the problems still aren't fixed, but that's also part of the other problems the Canadian military has. But yeah, it's something I look at, but I've kind of avoided on purpose just because of the controversial nature, and I get enough controversy as it is on the other stuff. So it's kind of something I've avoided, to be honest. But it's something I can definitely put back on my radar. Yeah, the Deacon Bunker is super cool. I've been there in the good old town of Carp, Ontario, just outside Ottawa. Technically, it's Ottawa now. Not hard to get to. There's also a good ice cream place literally just down the road. called Carp Creamery. You can make a day of it, actually. And I suggest that in a video I did a while back. Anyway, yeah, it's cool. They've done amazing work in making it look like it used to be. That's a crazy story. And I still don't think it would have worked. There's at points that's just cinder block and dirt protecting these people. And supposedly in this, that's going to run the government in the country while there's nuclear war. It wasn't going to work. Also, it leaks like crazy. Still does. They have tons of problems with that. But yeah, maybe I could get in there again and do a better video on it because I have an old one that wasn't good. It was done at the beginning of the channel. And it's not great, but I can maybe get in there again. Yeah, and that's back to the Cold War with Jay. Again, thank you for your support about the channel. But yeah, NORAD is an interesting one. DEW line, the building of that thing. So that's the early warning, distant early warning line way up in the north. Elements in Greenland across, what is it then? Northwest Territories, Yukon, and Alaska. Crazy stories up there. That things that they were doing up there, how they built it and then did it with maintaining it, and then there's still pieces of it up there today. The photos are amazing. They were using World War II equipment, basically. Like I'm talking like landing craft to like get divers in close to blow rocks to make a beach to bring everything on. Like it's crazy that they did this, and this is all in the late 50s, 60s. So it's wild. Yeah, Norma got yours, which is awesome. That's a good suggestion, Scott. Doing stuff with military museums, I could definitely reach out to some, see if they want to do anything. There's quite a few across the country. But yeah, I can talk to them, see if they want to do some stuff. Or maybe just in general. It doesn't even necessarily have to be Canadian, but that's a good idea. I'm going to have to come back to these comments later when they get re-uploaded with the live and write everything else down. But obviously, it's a world I know and have worked in and continue to do. So it's something I am fascinated in doing and talking to people. And I know you go to a ton of places too, Scott, which is I'm very jealous. Yeah, it's an interesting game. There's a lot of big boys out there that take all the attention. It's hard to get in. It's hard to start. And it's hard to survive when you're a little fish. Very hard. No, I don't know. See, that's the thing. I don't need to do anniversaries anymore. I just want to do more World War I because I want to do more World War I. There's just tons of stories there that haven't been covered or have been covered poorly. Looking at you, Vimy Ridge, or not at all. 100 Days campaign just been covered so poorly, which drives me nuts. Yeah, it's something I've been thinking about doing again and getting into it because we just have so much material on the First World War. There's so much writing about it and so many firsthand accounts, and then memoirs being written later and how they're controversial and some were causing all kinds of fights and stuff like that. And to me it's fascinating. So you got to kind of change it a bit to get it to fit the YouTube format, but it's. There's lots out there. I don't know. I don't necessarily have to be tied to anniversaries, but I was just trying to do that with Normandy to get some traction, which I think kind of worked. So yeah, so that's the thinking of that. It doesn't have to be. I like doing it that way as well because it's just a good way to grab attention. Yeah, I mean, that is a good idea, Nolan. Actually, I really like that. I'm trying. I tried to do that more in the past as well. Probably didn't do it the right way. I don't really have any blogs anymore because there's just a lot of work that I just don't have time for. It would just be another thing that I don't have time to do, unfortunately. But I could maybe look into that. Again, I need more funding. People can do all these blogs and secondary things because they can hire a team. I can't. Like I've asked some other creators and I'm like, how do you do this? How do you do that? They're like, well, it's outsourced. I'm like, oh, that's great, but I can't outsource anything. I can barely pay myself. I can't pay others. So you know what I mean? Like that's the thing, right? I'm up against those guys. So I'm fighting for space with, almost 2 arms tied behind my back. But I do like that idea. I would like, that's what I'm saying with the live streams, get people on, get some people here that, whose work isn't very well known and help them in that way. But yeah, I mean, it's hard. And I've discussed this. Canadian military history is incredibly limited. It's very niche when it really shouldn't be, because the thing I've been thinking about recently is, people, particularly in public history, will do a military history, page or channel or social media thing. And all they'll do is British and American stuff, but nobody says it's limited, which is interesting to me. I mean, they might do one video a year on something else, but all they're doing is talking about American stuff nonstop. That's fine. But if you do Canadian, you're niched and you're doing stuff people are not interested in. So, you know what I mean? I'm trying to balance so much, and I'm still learning, still trying to figure out how the best way to do it. I don't know if the OTD channel has already been backed into a corner and there's no coming back. I don't know. This is something else I've been thinking about. Is this channel as is stuck? Is this going to be it? Right? Is it too known for a limited thing? Is it only known for Canadian military history? And I obviously started it that way. And again, I was learning. I was on my own. They don't teach you this stuff in grad school. They teach you about using the right form of a word and how to research, but they don't teach you how to do any of this. So learning as I was going. Nothing like this existed, and still doesn't really exist, that does this much Canadian focus with this format. No one else is really doing this, with my experience and my insights in this way, right? Bringing all this different stuff together, which to me is very important. But yeah, you're right. I got some things to think about. I just think if I do that specifically, I'm limiting everything, and this will not, it won't survive 2025. It's come close to collapsing a couple of times. Doing okay for now. I'm thinking another possible endpoint is coming up. Maybe into the spring, it might not be doing so good. So again, that's why I just keep asking for any support I can get. Watching the videos is helpful. That's a good way to make these things happen. If I get the more support I get, the more I can do. The less support I have, the less I can do. So that's just the name of the game. I'm not going to get sponsorships because apparently those are dying anyway. So this is really limiting my options. And it's just a ton of work to do all this stuff. Like doing the metadata and a thumbnail of a video takes way longer than you think it takes. Still surprises me the length this stuff takes. And it drives me nuts. Oh, thanks, Maddie. Thank you so much. And you too as well, Pete. Thank you again for your support of the channel, both of you. Yeah, that's an interesting, right? These wars that weren't really wars. That's the thing. They've been covered to death on the big channels. So I just don't want to redo anything. Redo stuff that's already been done. But that one almost came to blows, which is interesting. Like a lot, which is crazy when you think about it. But things were not so good, right? Between Britain and the United States, and Canada often got caught in the middle. But yeah, there's a lot of that going on. Yeah, that's a good suggestion as well. I need to talk to both of them. I just haven't had the chance to do it. Yeah, it's especially Nick's book. Just because I want to do more Navy too, right? Like that's something I want to do more of. And Stephen Fisher obviously knows his stuff. He's just been super busy too. He was gone. He was like in Antarctica or something for an extended period. So I just said I can't get him on by the end of the year. It's just not going to happen. But yeah, that's a good suggestion as well. No term limit whatsoever. For Canadian Prime Minister, they can be Prime Minister from they're legally able to do it to death. That can be decades. King did it. He was Prime Minister for a very long time. Very, very long time with a little break there for a short period where the depression got worse. Anyway, yeah, you can go forever. There's no term limits in any way, shape, or form on any of it, really. No, nothing. There's nothing. No limits whatsoever. Yeah, Canada did in most ways. I agree, Jay. Yeah, in most ways. I just think there's smaller groups they could have done better with. Some of it's not their fault. Some of it is their fault. And I know that because I've seen the documents. They're saying they're whiners, complainers, ignore them. That's not okay. But yeah, I've talked about that. I talked about that in my dissertation, which well, that's how some of the people in the Canadian military at the end of the war thought the Hong Kong guys were just whining, which is interesting. They're the ones who are POWs the longest, and they're just whiners. Okay. Okay, so there's a new Bulge book coming out. Oh, 28th. Wow. Oh, interesting. There's one you don't hear about. March 31st. Okay, good to know. We'll look into that one as well. Yeah, I'll have to look at that one. Yeah, it's interesting. Okay. Yeah, another book on Normandy. Due course, so that's going to be Guy Simmons, Norma's favorite. Yeah, that's an interesting one to look at as well. If I can get my hands on a copy, if it doesn't cost $1,000, which more and more Canadian books seem to be costing nowadays, getting more and more expensive. Yeah, I need to get him back on the channel. Yeah, we talk often enough, so I should get him back on here. Oh, Irving's building Corvettes. Seriously? This is really interesting. They're doing a lot. Well, they're having an issue with the naming because they're building a lot of like Arctic, what they call them Arctic. I don't know. The focus is on up north, right? Which is chalk and ice a lot of the time. So you have to take that into account. They've already launched one, another, or two now. More coming, which still won't be enough, but we're sort of working on it. That's interesting, though. I'll have to look into that because Irving is the big ship maker, right? So, yeah, a lot of stories like that. No, a lot. Yeah, there's a ton of stories like that. Or they just thought it was disrespectful, or it wasn't keeping traditions, and it just seemed short-sighted. In a lot of ways, it was, and it caused more, I think, problems than it did good. But that's another thing, and that's something we'll be debating in those circles forever. No, none. We don't. We have none of that stuff. Oh my. Oh geez. Yeah, there's a lot of reunions. A lot. I mean, yeah, it's hard to look at them. I mean, there's some stuff that have survived from them. Those are super niche. I'm already niche as it is. Yeah, I mean, that stuff is obviously fascinating for us real nerds here. Maybe that could be like a supporter thing. I could be doing more of that as well, more supporter only stuff, which I've already started doing a little bit of. If you haven't seen those yet, if you are a supporter, do check that out. There's some stuff on there I don't share anywhere else. I'll be doing more of that. I know I didn't want to do that at the beginning, but I don't think I have a choice because the support's not where I need it, and I need to up it, and I got to do something different to make it work. So maybe, yeah, or I can dig on this stuff because I've seen some of the stuff already. Like I've seen a bunch of the reunion stuff. It's always funny to me. They always made the menus like it would be like Passchendaele potatoes, and that's always what sticks in my mind from these reunions and the things that were discussed. And I was looking at some Hong Kong ones just before the holidays. It was the same sort of idea. They were huge deals too. They were massive deals. Whole cities would go all out for these things, and obviously most of them are gone. But I don't foresee that anything like that ever happening again, unless there's another war like this. Yeah, I've had Nathan on. We talked about Dieppe. Was it Dieppe? I'm not sure what they got going on, to be honest. I haven't talked to Nathan in a bit. I could reach out to him. I don't work with him anymore. I used to. Kind of fizzled. But yeah, I can see if they got anything big on the go they might want to talk about, because they did a ton of stuff. They went there as well. They went there for the anniversary, I believe, to Normandy. I've been there a couple of times. They were looking at some Dieppe stuff, some locations that don't get ton looked at because a lot of them are private property around Dieppe as well. A lot of those stuff, the shore batteries specifically. Yeah, so it's I'm not sure what they got going on, but I can ask. Yeah, they did pretty well. Pretty well. Canadian Corps cast kind of a long shadow as well. Yeah, Substack's another thing I'm thinking about, but I'm not sure how that would go. I don't know if it would get support because I'm already struggling to get support. And I tried doing blogs and stuff on Patreon. I didn't do enough. I know that. It's hard to write. Writing's so damn hard. I'm not a natural writer like some people. I struggle to write, and it takes me so long. I think I just got to sit down at one point with a calendar and just think. But yeah, it's something I haven't been kicking around. But yeah, Canadian military history is too niche to continue being the majority of the focus. Can still be here, can still be done, do stuff that I know would get attention or is controversial. Because I do want to do something, kind of a controversial video that I've been kicking around an idea in my head that I think will get attention. Because that's also the part of the game, right? You got to get views that keep going. It's just the name of the game. It is what it is, and I'm a trained historian, and I still want to make that work. It can't just be a hobby for me, unfortunately. I again talked about that earlier, but I can't make it a hobby because it's just not who I am, and it's a whole other thing is personal. But yeah, it's just I got to think of some ways to do this, and I think I have my way in. I'm trained as a historian. I've got American academic background as well. American topics are always popular, so. I'm trying my best. Yeah, thanks again, Pete. Appreciate it. Yes. Yeah, Nick is great. I think I talked to him a couple of times, but yeah, I definitely need to get him on because I want to do that Navy stuff. Well, the question was why? It costs too much. Just costs too much. Still costs too much. That's always the answer. It costs too much. Nobody wants to foot the bill. We never want to foot the bill in this country. That's something I've been talking actually with David from the Cold War channel, because he's Canadian, obviously, but he does a Cold War broadly. He's always asking, like, well, what's going on with that? I'm like, it's money. Always money. It's constantly money. It's been like that since 1914 and before. It's just the same thing. It costs too much. Same with the carrier program. Costs too much. Had its utility, anti-submarine warfare at the time, especially, and it was used for shipping and supporting even peacekeeping missions, right? Like literally the first peacekeeping mission was brought over on an aircraft carrier, and we just did away with it. Yeah. Oh, and yeah, so that's another thing. But yeah, there's two technically that are Canadian. There's precursors that are technically Royal Navy, but manned by Canadians. One of them gets torpedoed and survives. It's a crazy story. The Nabob, it could do in that as well. It's just, yeah, the ideas are endless, and I just got to get my way in. The Nabob is a fascinating story with how that worked and the whole logistics behind it. And you had the Air Fleet Wing, with the fighters on board. It was a Canadian crew, technically under the Royal Navy, and then there was issues of payment and these things go on, and that just reminded me of Uganda, HMS Uganda, the boat that voted itself out of the war, and how I'm going to do a video on that, roughly around where that happens. That's a crazy story too, and no one really explains it well. It's missing the context of what's going on there, because it's just a lot of people who do the videos on it don't have the Canadian background, which is missing. Like that just reminded me. I think that's what Project 44 is doing, is stuff on Afghanistan. I think that's their new focus. So that could be good. Because Nathan himself is an Afghan vet. There's always some crazy stories. And I know a ton of Afghan vets. I'm not sure how to go about that yet, to be honest. We have an official history now. It's really only accessible to the general public online as a PDF, which is unfortunate. They scrapped the program to publish it again because of money in hardcovers. So we're not getting those. They exist, but they only went to museums and bases and in units, which is, to me, is short-sighted. Again, it's all about the money. But I don't know how to do this yet. To me, it's too close. It's still too close. I'm not sure how to go about it. And it's usually controversial from its beginning to its end, to the collapse of the supporting Afghan government and the Taliban coming back. I just don't know my way in. And I know so many Afghan vets, I don't want to do them disrespect by doing it. So again, it's something I think about a lot, Fiona and others. It's a great suggestion, and it is something I'm kicking around in my head. I'm just not sure how. I guess I should just talk to a bunch of vets and see what they think. But yeah, it's something I am kicking around and looking at, and maybe making it a bigger project and getting some of those memories down. But I think that's what Project 44 is trying to do, so I don't want to step on their toes as well. But again, that is a good idea. It's something to think about. Yeah, and then there's Alex there. Can confirm. Yeah, it just came back to me. Yeah, that's probably going to change, which is terrifying in more than one way. Oh, see, Norma left a while ago. Oh, Norma just left. Okay, I'm catching up. Maybe you could talk. Ralph Ennis. Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's quite a few of those guys, actually, that have these, extensive careers and, starting with the Second World War and go through and, a lot of the unification kills, leaves them, makes them retire and all that. And you get guys serving in Korea as well, which is fascinating because they're just literally thrown into the U.S. wings. And squadrons doesn't send fighter squadrons into Korea, just transport. So yeah, there's so many stories of these guys that got crazy careers. But yeah, it's another, because I just do a lot of Air Force work. So the ones I'm getting to know better and better all the time. Yeah, that's been the concern for, I think, ever. Me too. What? Oh, this is a story I do not know. Assassinated Canadian ballistics expert Gerald Bull. I have no idea who that is. Now I feel stupid. Canadian engineer. When was he killed? 1990. Oh, yeah. Yeah. That guy. Okay. Yeah, that's a story. Yeah, okay. that's a story. Wow. I forgot about that guy. Holy moly. That is quite the story. Totally forgot about that. A guy who works with the Iraqis and then is possibly assassinated with Mossad. Yeah, that's a story. And he's Canadian too. U of T engineer. Holy moly. I forgot about this. He had a PhD and everything. Yeah, Project Babylon. Holy crap. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm writing that down. Sorry, one sec. Let's see what's out there. There might be stuff out there already, but I can usually find my way in with how I do these things. Yeah, that's a great idea. I'm going to let that one through, see what I can come up with. 10 years, yeah, for vets to talk, same with Second World War. Yeah, we're over. Well, the end of the Canadian mission was over 10 years ago now. So, yeah, we'll see. We'll see. We'll see how this goes. That's what I mean. It's still so early to me to be kind of setting anything down. But then oral history and eyewitness history is all kinds of issues. But we'll see. Oh, that's too bad. Yeah. Yeah, that vote, I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall in that room when they did the vote to go home. Thanks for coming out, Alex. You're probably already gone, but yeah. Yeah, I mean, just have been a fly on that wall when they did the vote. I think it was a secret vote. I could be wrong. I don't think they just did raise your hand. I could be wrong though. Because it's well within their rights. It was the program set out by the Canadian government. And that's why I want to do that, because nobody really talks about that context in these videos. They're like, they just voted and went home. I'm like, well, you're missing a big chunk of the context here. You don't have to agree with it, but you have to get the context right. Yeah, should they have, picked up stakes, quote unquote, and left? No, it doesn't make the Canadian military look good, but they were well within their rights to do so. And they did. And I mean, they got home before the war had ended by the time they got home, and they got quite a frosty reception at Pearl Harbor. But it's a fascinating story. Yeah, NATO is gonna. Yeah, I got the gerbil stuff. So yeah, you guys are on top of this stuff super quick. Holy crap. Yeah, NATO membership, and if NATO's even going to survive in its current form anytime soon. If it survives for the next little while, I'd be surprised if it does. To be completely honest, I don't see it surviving very much longer in its current format. But it is what it is. The world always changes. But I'm not a political science policy expert, but it doesn't look good. Yeah, Fiona, that's an excellent idea, actually, because that's, again, it would be more of an academic project, so I don't think I'd ever do it, but because those days are, I think, well behind me, yeah, looking at family experiences, right? Because that's all that's left, right? Of Second World War veterans, sorry, is their children, right? What did they experience? What was it like for them, right? Especially those who that parent never came home, right? Like, what was that like, and all that stuff. So yeah, talking to people and those who lost people is something we don't talk about too much. Obviously, we don't want to bother people if they don't want to talk about it, but getting people to talk about it can be difficult. But some people do want to talk about it, and they want to share, and they want a way of healing. It's a way of sharing. It's a way of helping others. In my experience, talking to others about this stuff, not in any online discussions, just talking to people with different experiences, whose parents went through a lot of stuff, or those who had, uncles and stuff that never came home, and some whose parents never came home, or all that kind of thing. So it's a fraught subject, but it's an important one in my opinion. So I don't know. It's just something I gotta bat around. Sorry, I'm getting a message about something. Oh, okay, that can wait. Yeah, so it's something I've been thinking about as well, but it'd be more of an academic thing, so I don't know how it's going to work. But fascinating to me as well, yeah, is getting these things and seeing how it's played out over the last, what it starts in 2001, so 20 plus years. Oh, geez, yeah, the V3, yeah. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Yeah, it's the modern things are very fraught. Any more questions? Don't be afraid to hold back. Ask away. Ask away. Yeah, this period we're moving into, again, I don't want to say for sure, because I've seen historians do that in the past. It doesn't go well. Like some people said, the Soviet Union, when it's going to last into the 2030s, which clearly did not happen. Yes, it was a surprise, but that's the point. Surprises happen. It doesn't look good based on the rhetoric I'm seeing. A certain individual who was elected in November seems to be using this rhetoric, and people think it's all a big joke, which it's not. And then these jokes often become reality. So it's something coming up. Another thing I have been thinking about, and I wasn't going to talk about, but people still think it's funny, and I think it's extremely disrespectful and very inappropriate. This might be a bit of a rant here, is this 51st state nonsense. Canada, with Trump saying Canada is going to become the 51st state and keep calling our prime minister governor. It's hugely disrespectful. Obviously, he doesn't care about any of that. I'm not going to pretend to be. I'm anti-Trump. I don't care. I'm anti-authoritarian, so I'm not going to speak well of him. If that offends you, I'm sorry. That's just not something I'm ever going to do. He's not a good person, and he insults people nonstop, and I don't like that. So I don't care. So in that said, he keeps saying that's extremely disrespectful. We've been close allies for a very long time. It was a long struggle. Fought each other literally more than once. Shouldn't have to come to we're past all this. Why we're doing this again makes no sense to me. He's just being nasty to be nasty. That's what you do on the schoolyard, and you don't do that when you're running a country. And people are taking it as a joke, and that is hugely disrespectful. I keep seeing people discussing this on like podcasts and little snippets and on news, and how it has some sort of validity and how it might happen, and what's Canada going to bring to the United States. Also, I don't think Trump realizes that most Canadians would vote Democrat anyway. That's changing, but I still think it would mostly be Democrats. But he looks like he's doing away with democracy anyway. So it probably doesn't matter to him. But it's hugely disrespectful to say these things, and no one's doing anything about it. Nobody, and James is right. RPM is not calling him out. It's just so disrespectful. And we have our own stupid politics going on right now, where the opposition is saying Canada's been destroyed and Canada's not what it was, which is just not true, to win an upcoming election. It's really a bit much. Yeah. So, well, I mean, yes, you guys have been called the 51st state in the past. You guys haven't been invaded by them multiple times. They used us to get at you, and they've invaded us. The last ones were in the 1830s. Actually, that's a lie. 1860s. It's not that long ago. It's a while ago, but it's not that long ago. They weren't government sanctioned officially. The first couple ones were unofficially. So it's just it's something that it's it's something that's real. They're right there, and if they did anything, there's nothing we can do. Not anymore. We did not burn down the White House, by the way. Sorry, no Canadians were involved in the not overland. Sorry, that's American Civil War. Peninsula. No, is it overland campaign? What do they call it? 1812, where they land in Maryland and then go on a rampage, make the U.S. government run from D.C. But overland? No, that's Civil War. Peninsula? One of them. Anyway, that's mostly British regulars, Marines. No Canadian connection whatsoever. The force doesn't even come through Canada. It goes through Bermuda. But yeah, that's something that's driving me crazy. It has nothing to do. It's just so disrespectful. It's got nothing to do with helping either side. How this is going to help the United States in any way, shape, or form, I don't know. We've been partners for a long time. All of our stuff is literally integrated, and he wants to do this. I mean, it's terrible. It's just, and we're getting infected, yeah, in a lot of ways with the nastiness and insults and all this stuff. And it's just getting a bit much. And I'm just not okay with it. And just something I know I just had to get off my chest as I see people making a joke of it. And it's not funny because people will die. People are already dying under these types of administrations. And I don't want that to happen. There's nothing I can much do about it in the United States, but we can do something about it here. We need to do this. So, and yeah, the Poles have dealt with this, the Baltics as well, as Jay's saying here. It's the same, and that always lends to people dying. And I don't want those American policies coming up here because it's going to get people killed. And I'm not okay with that. So I don't want to be the 51st state because I don't want to be part of that mess, to be honest. Sorry, Americans. I'm not trying to insult you, and I know it's not your fault, but it's just I'm seeing the things that are happening, and I don't want them here. Yeah, I put off going to the States for the next little while because of that. So it's a mess, and it's not okay. And that's all I just want to say. It's not funny. It's disrespectful to me, but neither here nor there. But that's just my opinion. You're allowed to have your own. Nothing I can do. But yeah, any other questions, anything, fire away. I'm more than happy to stick around. I'm kind of booked off some time to do a little bit more, so no issues there. Yeah, it's just the current state of things is not looking so good. And it's going to have economic impacts as well, which is also worrying the crap out of me. I'll just see if I missed anything. Lots of good topic ideas, though. Crazy. Crazy the stuff people have come up with. Yeah, it's getting so toxic, and it doesn't need to be. It just really doesn't need to be, and it's more of a recent thing as well. Yeah, I mean, I'm not going because it's just it's not safe in a lot of ways. I'm sorry, it's just not, and it's just not something I'm okay with. Yeah, I put off going to Hong Kong for the same reason. I don't want to end up in some jail for something I said. It looks like that's the direction some things are heading. So that's a bit crazy, but yeah. Yeah, so yeah, don't plan on going to the States anytime soon. But yeah, the inauguration later this month should be an interesting something. I don't know what word to use. Yeah, I don't have much. Oh, here we go. Oh, that's a good question. I don't see why. I don't see what benefit that would have. It wouldn't bring NATO in if they're the one taking offensive action. They're pretty small. And the Russians keep making stupid and stupider mistakes. So just keep letting them do that. I don't know. It's interesting to see how that might play out over the next little while. Europe seems to finally be getting together on how to support Ukraine. Could be wrong. But it looks like American support's about to dry up. And it's a lot of questions. A lot of questions. See you, James. Thanks for coming out. Appreciate it. Yeah, that was the last thing I really want to talk about was that whole thing and how we've been invaded by the Americans multiple times with these just so-called ideals and ideas that turn violent and get people killed, and really result in nothing. But obviously things have changed a lot, clearly. So we'll see. But yeah, so 2025, we'll see. Any more questions, please fire away. I know we're on a bit of a delay here. But if you got anything you want me to answer, anything, it doesn't have to necessarily be history related. Happy to chat for a little bit longer if you like. Yeah, it's yeah. Also, I was going to mention the Germans. I don't know enough about it, but yeah, it's not been going well. Well, we have Andreas here. He doesn't have to speak to it, but he is German. Don't want to put him on the spot. He's the only person I know who's told me they're from Germany. But yeah, it's just more questions, I think, that just will need time to play out. Again, that's the historian. I mean, just see how it goes. But I'm not a policy expert, so I don't know. It's not my area. Yeah, 2025 is shaping up to be a strange year already. I'm honestly not very hopeful of how this year's going to go, to be honest. I'm not looking forward to it, to be completely honest with you. At least last year I had a trip to Normandy to look forward to with all the craziness going on, but this year not so much. Yeah, and then there's all these actors that are getting involved that shouldn't be and throwing money around, and yeah, it's crazy. Well, that's a question I can answer. Well, indirectly. What's favorite Canadian unit to research? Oh, geez. Well, that changes all the time. That's a difficult one to ask because it just changes so often. I guess I can answer it in a way. I like units that their war diaries are extensive because that gives me something to work with, right? A place to set and ideas and events and thinking patterns and how does that fit with everything else. Without that, you don't have as much. So I love units where the war diarist wouldn't shut up. Those are always my favorite. When the unit's just like, we were in Germany, blah blah blah, it's 20 degrees today, like that doesn't give you much. So I mean, it tends to change because I just do so many different things. Do a lot of Air Force stuff now, especially, so that keeps changing. And I keep looking at the different squadrons who are like serving in North Africa, and then they move up through Sicily and then into Italy, and then supporting that, and they're part of the Desert Air Force, which is crazy. And then you've got things like the bombing units and operating out of Britain, and then you've got the stuff through Korea and then all of that, and then you bring that forward to Persian Gulf 1. That's always fascinating to look at. I mean, my academic background is in the Army stuff, Canadian wise, so I always find those interesting to do. And any really ones in the First World War are always fascinating to me. Any of them, artillery, cavalry, infantry, even higher levels are always interesting to look at, see how things are going and how they're coming to decisions and things like that. So I can't give you a specific answer. I'm just doing a Hong Kong project right now, so maybe then one of those. I'm doing stuff with the Royal Rifles of Canada, which I did years ago. I finished my dissertation years ago, but yeah, I'm back at it again in a way. So the Royal Rifles always have a special place in my heart because of that. Also because they don't exist anymore. They're gone. They're not even a reserve unit anymore. They've been, placed on the supplemental list as the official prevalence. They could come back, but I doubt it. Doesn't really make sense to bring them back, given geography and all that kind of stuff. They were pretty old too. And they got the kibosh with some cuts. So they always have a special place in my heart. because of the Hong Kong stuff. And there is another idea. I just remembered kicking around an idea of another Hong Kong video looking at a very small action. But to me, it's fascinating. It takes place over a span of a couple hours, but it's successful. I've talked about it before. I've written on it in numerous places. It's successful at first. The initial attack goes extremely well, and then it doesn't, as these things tend to happen. But for such a small action, only involving 2 platoons out of D Company of the Royal Rifles at Stanley Prison, or Stanley Gallon, whatever you want to call it, towards Stanley Village, is fascinating. Just how the amount of that's written on this little thing. And I got to talk. He's unfortunately passed because all the Hong Kong veterans are now gone. How much is written about this thing? I got to talk to him about it, and I got my notes on that. So that'll be helpful. So that's pretty cool. Yeah, PPCLI was made, Reg Force, yes. Any other that should have been kept for full time? That's a good question. You also had the 22nd, right, which was the battalion at the time of the CEF, was made a Reg Force unit, right? A French-Canadian, French-speaking infantry regiment was created out of the 22nd Battalion after the war, which was the right thing to do. We needed that. We probably needed more than one. It's a good question. I mean, you had the really well-known ones like 42nd Battalion, which was Black Watch. Obviously, the Black Watch are still around. Still got that going. Talking about those units have some pull. Other ones in Toronto that are still reserve units. That kind of thing. I can't think of any more to really make permanent. I mean, maybe on the West Coast specifically, right? Because PPCLI go west. Technically founded in Ottawa. I don't think the Westerners like that being brought up, but it's true. It's true. There's a memorial to it right in Lansdowne, if you've ever been there, by the football stadium. Yeah, it's fascinating. I don't know. It's hard to say because I just know how that was going to go. Like, I know what the thinking was. They were going to shrink that military down to nothing, and that's what they did. We lost a lot more than just those infantry units, right? Like, all the lessons learned with artillery were done away with. Things like mobility were done away with, right? We did tons on, mobile warfare. We were the first with, mobile machine guns units and things like that. And they just got rid of all of it and didn't do much left. So I don't know. It's a lot of things. I would have done it more in terms of lessons learned and keeping those moving. I was, again, recently asked about this as well, so I've been thinking about it. But that's what they should have done. But they gutted the funding because there was a recession right after the First World War, right? Because war production stops. Government money stops flowing. There's no one to keep those machines and those factories running because they're tooled for basically shells in Canada at the time. So it just, makes everything fall apart. And then, government's way of thinking back then is cut spending to stop recessions, which we know doesn't work. So it caused all kinds of trouble. And they think we don't need this military anymore. We just beat Germany. They're not coming back. Why keep it? Which was obviously short-sighted in hindsight. But what can you do? But yeah, I mean, they probably should have kept it bigger. Yeah, and then same with the Second World War. They do the same. Tear up a lot of them, bring them back down, move them around, and take away those lessons and strip their equipment. Literally, they didn't want to bring most of it back. They had to fight to get a few back as like memorials, things like that. But yeah, they left a lot of that literally over in Europe. The ideas and the thoughts. It's a cycle. It happens a lot in Canadian military history. It's learn the lessons through blood and death. Forget them. Do it again. Multiple times. And just a lot of Canadians have to die to relearn these lessons. It happens with every conflict we've been in since the Boer War earlier, 1885, but that's a whole other thing. Yeah. I'm sorry, I don't know what you mean. World War II, like the unit's history. Sorry, just Jim's question here. Tomorrow, I don't think so. I don't think I can make it. I got some work to do tomorrow. and some other stuff. I don't know if I can make it. I got a lot to start with the new year. Yeah. So. Oh yeah, World War II. Yeah. Yeah, the contributions there obviously are big. I mean, it's just the lessons learned, right? Like that's huge, and that has value for Canada and our allies, especially things like the formation of NATO and things like that. We just kind of had a short-sighted look on things, right? There was tons of people after the First World War, because I've seen the letters, who wanted to go regular force, who wanted to stay, and they told them, no, there's no money. We are not keeping you. Not so much with the second, that doesn't really happen. The ones that are, seen to have the talent are kept on or encouraged to stay on. Some just do the reserve thing again, like they were doing before the war, and some come back, right? With all over like with Korea, that happens quite a bit. But it's more of a, what do they call it in businesses? Not occupational knowledge, it's institutional knowledge. A lot of that is done away with multiple times, which I think is a mistake. There's lots of ways to learn. Yeah, so it's a mistake. So I think has tons of lessons for right now, but we're not going to learn them. We're too busy sniping at each other on social media to learn these things and to focus on things that don't matter in the long run. But that seems to be a trend all over the world today. But yeah, we are tied to a question like this. No, we have no chance whatsoever. We don't even have anti-aircraft assets. There's nothing we can do. Not a thing. They can hit us unless we go irregular war and a protracted one for 20 plus years like they did in Afghanistan. No. Not at all. We can do nothing. We have a very small Air Force. Our Navy cannot even come close to matching American assets. Not even close. The Army's not even remotely at all able to handle what the Americans could throw at us. And no, well, sort of ish. It's paid well for an officer. Below that, no. It's not paid well. They're not handled well. They have to move constantly. That's an institutional thing where they move people around on purpose. I don't agree with it, but that's how they've been doing it for a very long time. To me, again, it just loses lessons for no reason other than to gain the knowledge. So officers get paid pretty well. Higher ups do pretty well. This is all public information on what they get paid. But below that, no. And it doesn't have the societal prestige that it may have once had in, say, in the 19th century. People don't see it as a good thing, as a good career option. They just kind of go, oh, okay. Yeah, they don't really care. Yeah, like people were struggling to make their housing allowance. Like the housing allowances weren't even close to enough. And yet they keep ripping them across the country every couple of years. It's a mess. So, how did Canada finance World War II? Good question. War bonds, taxes, or a mix? A mix. Huge war bond drives. A lot of them are to gain, gain the cash, just the cash, which is an issue. I mean, you could take it on as debt, but to get the cash is helpful. But it also stopped inflation in a lot of ways, because this is why it was really smart that they did this. Is because Canada is walloped by the Great Depression, right? Like parts of America are hit really, really hard because of economic reasons, but also like geography and weather, right? Like huge portions of the United States are walloped as well. But that happens in Canada almost across the country. Canada in the 1930s is all about natural resources. That was the economy. It was not even oil yet, really. It was forestry, food, some minerals, things like that. It wasn't really even oil yet because the oil sands aren't even discovered at this point. So, they have an issue there. They have a problem there. The employment is massive. My grandfather, because he was pretty young, because he was born in the mid-20s. So he doesn't really remember the start of it so well, but he remembers by, the hardest parts. And he was from a farming area. And the poverty he was discussing, it's just heartbreaking of how poor these people were. So once the war kicks off, right, with war production, because we're in it from the beginning, and even before, we're not like a British rearmament, but it's happening. There's that. So they were worried about inflation because all of a sudden these people have all this money that they haven't had, and they're going to go spending it. But there's also nothing to spend it on, right? Because the economy went from resource-based to war-based, and there's no in between. So they're like, well, you'll make money if you just give it to us after the war. You'll get some money back. You'll get more back. So that was a huge thing. It helped keep inflation down. It helped keep things relatively calm here, economic-wise, right? They were able to transfer a lot of those factories into civilian production as well, just like the United States. So it really helped stabilize things afterwards. The government funding just didn't stop like they did in the First World War. So it really helped Canada. Income tax, obviously, is part of it as well. War bonds are massive. There's debt, but it's mostly paid off pretty quick. And they give a lot of money, actually. They give a lot. It's in war production, right? Like they gave Britain $1 billion. It's a lot. And they gave them more after that. They're giving them stuff for free. There's, relationship with the United States and all that stuff as well. Canada's not part of Lend-Lease. They're not getting Lend-Lease. They're part of Lend-Lease and shipping things that are Lend-Lease, but they're not getting the equipment as Lend-Lease. Goes to Britain first, technically, and then sometimes Canadians get it. Canadians are making most of their own stuff. A lot of it, and even for the Allies too, they made a lot of guns and things like that. So that's how they help pay for it. And a lot of it, it's in that way. But it's war bonds. It's help and taking on loans and things like that. But it's a lot of that, and they're paid off super fast. Because the Canadian economy just explodes, late 40s, early 50s. It just explodes because of the production, right? We became a manufacturing-based economy almost overnight, in the sense of the word. It's a fascinating one to look at. It's not I'm not an economic historian or anything, but I've done a little bit of digging on this. And Canada and the United States are giving a good chunk of money to Britain and helping Britain a lot, and giving a ton of cash, and they keep raising cash. And all that good stuff. So yeah, Canada, it covered it really, really well. I think that was handled really, really well by the King government and how they did that. And there's some fighting with the provinces over taxes, but for those who are not Canadians, what else is new for us? We have never stopped doing that. Still doing it today. We're always fighting about who should tax what and get the majority of what. That's never stopped. Yeah, NORAD command is typically switched. There's always if it's an American first commander, it's assistant commander is always the other. It'll be a Canadian or vice versa. That's the agreement that was made. Yeah, so I've been doing a ton of work on Ortona lately. Because the anniversary of the battle just passed, and I was there in the spring, and the sound itself and all that. So yeah, it's a fascinating one because High Command never expected within the 8th Army, right, which the Canadians are fighting under at the time, in 5th Corps, I believe, at the time in December 43. That was not expected. They were not expecting. I don't know if they knew how soon they knew it was the Fallschirmjäger in the area. I'm not sure. I haven't looked at that in a bit. But they expect them to do what they had always been doing, which was pull back to a river and hold on for as long as possible, cause as many casualties, and then just keep doing it. Because that's what they had done, right? Once things sort of stabilized after September with the landings, because Avalanche doesn't go great at first. And Baytown's got a long way to go up the toe of the boot and all the way up. So things kind of stabilized. But that was what the thinking was. But the Germans, right, had put together the Gustav line. So that changes the whole shebang. And had Jason Giroux on the channel just before the holidays talking about this, and he explains this excellently on why it goes the way it does, and even things like doctrine of the Fallschirmjäger make it so much harder because they're working with less. They're actually outmatched. Rarity, but they're outmatched by tech alone, right? The Germans are supposedly known for these amazing tanks that are always there. Fallschirmjäger don't have them. Canadians outnumber them. Armor a lot. There is no German armor in Ortona, even guns, things of that nature. But the Germans held on to that thing tooth and nail. And then it took on this symbolic importance, which is massive in war. I think that gets discounted way more than people should. People think with hindsight of, yeah, that's not important strategically, but that doesn't matter at the time. People aren't always thinking straight, right? It doesn't necessarily matter at the time. You have to understand their thinking, not your own. But that's a huge history thing that I think is not done very well across the board. But yeah, it's a surprise, and it took the world by shock. I think the Western world anyway. They weren't expecting that, and it took on the name, and some people are against it, and I disagree because it's about the nature of the fighting, not the importance of the fighting. It's called Little Stalingrad in the press at the time because of the ferocious nature of the fighting. It's crazy. Like they're purposely luring people, like units, squads, whatever, into buildings and then blowing them up and burying people alive. Like it's getting hand to hand. People are fighting each other with trench knives in cellars and in rooms, and are blasting away at each other through walls with Bren guns. And like it's nasty, completely nasty. And then it just builds on itself. The reputation just keeps building because the Germans are told to hold. And it just builds up and builds up and builds up until the Germans realize they can't hold it anymore because they're about to be encircled. So yeah, it's a fascinating one. It's a great town to visit. It was a fascinating place to wander, the small little alleys, and once you can go there, you can see why this place was so hard to take. It's on a plateau, bordered by the sea and the deep, craggy, crocky ravine where you can barely walk through now today, let alone when someone's shooting at you. It's a fascinating little battle. And it had importance at the time. I think that is forgotten as well. It's a big, important battle in that sense. And it's one of the first urban battles that the Western Allies face. Because you don't really see that in North Africa to this degree, in a sustained degree anyway. And you don't see that in the southern tip of Italy and not so much in Sicily, right? You have fights in and around towns or much smaller towns. But this is a sustained one, which is a major difference. But yeah, it's a fascinating one to me, and one we need to keep remembering, and also has, and that's just what we were talking with Jason on the live stream, an importance to today, because urban warfare hasn't gone anywhere, and it hasn't changed all that much, really. So hopefully that answers your question. I hope. Pete, I do. I know you and I have discussed this. We've discussed this extensively. Another issue, it's just a YouTube thing, is how do I do that to make it interesting? I mean, it's fascinating to me that, places I knew as a kid were used as war production. And my grandfather worked in war production, and, the Toronto with the English plant, and, which is now condos, is the center of war production, and the amount the Canadians are cranking out, and how it's getting shipped all over the world, and how it's, trucks are made with English, Russian, and Mandarin on it to go to the Allies in the East, and to the nationalist Chinese and to the Russians, and all the same time. Like it's fascinating, and the War Museum has all that stuff, and you can see it there with the different languages on it, and it's a fascinating little piece of history. But I think it could be done. I might, have to pop in the War Museum, get some good shots and stuff like that. And I mean, I showed you, right, that Bren that's chambered for German ammunition to be used by the nationalist Chinese. Like to me, that's a crazy story, and encapsulates Canada's war almost perfectly, right? What Canada's actually, what Canada's war really looks like, and what it means, and how that impacts how the fighting goes, right? What Canada's doing and not doing, right? You get a lot of that just gets forgotten. It gets taken over by the battles and all that stuff when it's a much wider thing for Canada. But yeah, it's something I can look at, and there's tons of material on it. So that's not an issue. Yeah, Canada starts its own tank production pretty much. And then, of course, all of it's moved to the U.S. more or less, with the Shermans at least. But yeah, Canada's cranking out field pieces like nobody's business. Small arms ammunition round and artillery rounds. There are millions of this stuff. They're just cranking it out. It's wild. Blankets, right? They keep the Red Army warm. in a lot of ways. Like and boots and food and all the medical supplies. They're just making everything. Yeah, that would be fascinating. Is it in German? I'd love to hear, because I bought a few books on the Fallschirmjäger. I'm probably saying it wrong, but that's a good question. Anyone know if Fallschirmjäger could fight guerrilla warfare at the time? You mean? Did anyone know at the time? I don't know. That's a good question. I'm gonna say yeah, because the intel was pretty good actually. From what I was able to see, they had a pretty good idea of what they were capable of. Sorry, I just said Jim's question. I started thinking. I don't know. The intel's pretty good though. It doesn't say anything specifically about that I can remember off the top of my head, but I saw a lot of intel at the army level, divisional level, right down to the battalion level about this stuff. They didn't really know they were there at first though, down to the battalion level. They didn't know they were in Ortona. They thought it was just Wehrmacht at the time, and that changes obviously, but also they weren't planning for a slugfest. Is what it becomes. But yeah, I'm not too sure. I don't think so. But that's just a gut reaction of some research in a very small area of it all. But I went up to the 8th Army, so which I saw quite a few documents from written at the 8th Army level. But they're not thinking that. They're thinking, the hold and hold and then retreat, hold and retreat, hold and retreat. That was what they thought was going to happen. And in a few areas in that Ortona area is not what happens. So it's something that obviously threw them off, and that's what the German plan was, right? In Italy, delay, kill as many as you can. Yeah, everything was sent. Anything that was pretty much ready for war was sent to Britain, more or less. Early on, luckily, it didn't have a major impact, luckily. They could have. They didn't know at the time, but they did. They sent the fighter squadrons almost ASAP. They're founding the bomber squadrons in Britain, actually. Most of them are founded in Britain, even the ones that still exist today. It's crazy to think about, because I do research on them, trying to find some cool stories to share and on social media and such. But yeah, it's a part of the story too that luckily it doesn't have a major impact, right? It does later on with the Battle of the Atlantic, which I need to do more on. I know a lot of people have suggested that. But again, that's a long-ranging, literally time and distance-wise conflict that has so many moving parts. What do you focus on? Again, as one person. It's a fascinating one. But yeah, there's so many stories there at the beginning of people panicking, right? We're sending our Air Force away. What are we going to do when they come? It's problematic in a way. Currently, I have no idea. Not a clue. I could not tell you. So what do they do? What does we do with our out-of-date ordnance? Used to just dump it in the ocean. Not doing that anymore, luckily, which is a good thing. I'm not sure what they're doing with it. Maybe blowing it up. I know. Suffield in Alberta was massive, right? It was used by the British Army. I don't think they're using it anymore for munitions and testing and all that good stuff. I don't know if that's what they're doing. I know there's dump sites all over the country though that need to be cleaned up, but now those are old, so I don't know what's currently going on. But it's something. Sorry, I can't answer. But I know the old stuff, they're trying to get it out and mostly just blow it up. That's the easiest thing to do, right? Instead of storing it somewhere. Oh, thanks, Andreas, for that. So this is the diary Andreas was talking about here. I have to look that up. Henschel, Martin, Poppel. No, it's German. Poppel. God, I got to learn German better. Struggle with French, so German might be a bit of a reach for me. Yeah, Hurricane. Yeah, Elsie McGill. I've done a bunch on her actually for the RCAF Foundation. So yeah, her story is fascinating. Like, she had polio, for Christ's sake, and is still doing all that. That's wild. She doesn't obviously fully recover. She has some lingering effects from the polio. Didn't affect her brain in the slightest. But what she was able to do, and she kept going for decades. Like, it's wild. She was doing stuff on engineering and all that, and then moved to what's the official name? I forget. The Status of Women in Canada. She worked on that for years and years and years, and did tons of writing on it. Women's rights in Canada and women education, particularly, and engineering was a huge thing for her. I've seen those papers. It's fascinating. She's a fascinating person. She should really get more attention than she does. War production in Canada and the U.S. in any way coordinated? Yeah, the Allied war production is pretty much coordinated through, well, Britain, Canada, United States, more or less is coordinated. The best example I like to give for that is the production of Sherman tanks. Right, initially, well, Canada's doing its own thing, sort of, with the Rams and the Grizzlies. Doesn't go as well as they would have liked. So they eventually say, okay, America, you can make them faster. We can ship them, not no problem, but less problems, right? I think, again, the U-boat threat is extremely overblown. Further and further we get away from the war. So they're like, you guys handle it. We'll all use them. Use the same ones, more or less, obviously, other than the, oh my God, getting the name. 18-pounder. Not the 18-pounder. Yeah, 18-pounder in the tank. Firefly. Oh, that's bad. Okay, sorry. Been on holiday too long. The Firefly, obviously, in that. Other than that, they're all using the same ones. There's obviously different ones in there. It's got to be streamlined in that way, and it saves money and time. Also, you don't need to spread knowledge all around. You can concentrate it and work on anything. So that's a big part of it. Ammunition's massive part of it. 17-pounder. Yeah, I was having trouble there for a second. That stuff's coordinated. Their aircraft production as well, in a lot of ways, is sort of coordinated. Raw materials is a big coordination between Canada and the United States. That's one of the agreements that's reached even before the United States enters the war. That's part of it. Talked about it with Tim Cook when he came on. If you want to check that out, Andreas, he covers this stuff. I think it's even less than around 45 minutes, the whole live stream. So we talk about that as well. It's literally agreement between King and Roosevelt on how this is all going to be done, how we're going to integrate, removing tariffs. And literally the border, in that sense, did not exist during the war. It was gone. It just flowed where it needed to flow. Who needed it, got it where they needed it. And we had all those kinds of crown corporations and everything to do that. So that was a lot of coordination in that respect. And we were able to crank out the quote unquote little things that were used all over the place. Like, also another story that I used to illustrate this, especially because there's a surviving sort of one in the Canadian War Museum, is the Valentines, right? Valentines are made in Montreal at the Montreal Locomotive Works. They stopped those productions eventually, but a huge number of those end up in the Soviet Union. I think it's 50 or something like that. It's a good number. They end up in the Red Army. They're used in the advance. One ends up in a swamp, or I think marsh in Ukraine. They pull it out 90 something. The crew got out before it went in, so they all survived. But they pulled it out, and the Ukrainians gave it to Canada, gave it back. It's kind of like a goodwill gesture after independence kind of thing. And it's just in the Canadian War Museum. I think is in rough shape, but we have it as a good centerpiece for a good story, and it shows another way of Canada's impact on the war. B-24 long range squadrons. I'm sure there was one or two. I don't know if they were B-24 specifically. They had them. I'm not sure how many there were, though. Couldn't have been many, because that was a whole other mess. And kind of a fight between, obviously, the Air Force and the Navy, because the Navy didn't have the Air Force, still doesn't, of like other countries, right? It wasn't like that. We didn't have aircraft carriers, none of that stuff. They had some recon planes and things like that, and changes towards the end of the war. But at the beginning, when it's more needed, right, 43 and before, right when the Battle of Atlantic is de facto won. I think there's a few. They're using other kinds of aircraft, basically whatever they can get their hands on or anything that will take sustained flight. The Canso is used in huge numbers. We call it differently here, the Catalina. To everyone else, we call it the Canso. Those are the workhorses. But there are B-24s in Canadian or CAF livery. I've just seen the photos. I'm just not sure how extensive their use is. I mean, we had B-17s too, 3 of them or something. They use them for mail runs. It's funny what things get used for, what they don't, because we have all the British bombers, and then we're using the American ones for like testing and mail and scientific observation. It's a weird decision. I don't know who made it, but somebody did. We had a few of those things. Yeah, definitely there was B-24s as well. And there's one at the Canadian Warplane Heritage Museum outside Hamilton in Canadian livery, which is pretty cool. Yeah, I've heard that in War Thunder. I don't play it, but I've heard that the RAM is annoying if you're against it. I'm not sure why, but I guess that's what they decided to make it in the game. But that's fascinating. Yeah, there's one at the Canadian War Museum as well. It was running until it threw its transmission last summer. I don't know if they got it fixed yet or not. I didn't get to the event this summer, unfortunately. Got too busy, but it was running in summer 2023. I was there with Chris Camfield. And the thing blew its transmission. There was just smoke everywhere. I think they got it fixed, but I'm not sure. But it was in running condition. I got to go in it, which was awesome. That was really, really cool. That's something I'll never forget. They like the Valentine. I know that. They really like the Valentine. They like the trucks. There's all this discussion and in some of the accounts and things that we have, especially stuff that's been translated to English of the trucks, the Studebaker. They just call them the Studebaker, even if they weren't made by Studebaker. They loved them. My wife's grandfather is now passed, unfortunately, was in the Polish army that was part of the Red Army, and he drove those, and to drive the Katyusas around, which he told me, and then it was just a normal day, and I went, oh my god, that's amazing. Why didn't you say this before? He said they were great. So things like that, I think they liked. I don't think they liked the Shermans as much. I'm not really sure why. I mean, the T-34 had its drawbacks too, but maybe not because they didn't get as many. I don't know, but that's just something I've heard. I don't know if it's as widespread as people might make it sound like. Yeah, Pete's talking about the same thing there. Yeah, and then there's that whole thing. The whole how to bomb and what to bomb and who's bombing where and where do we put the bombers and all of that stuff. What is the bomber's job? That went on for the whole war. And who was in charge of what. And it's complicated and definitely deserves a closer look. I mean, it's discussed, obviously, right? Coastal Command is not untouched. Yeah, Bomber Command, Fighter Command, Coastal Command, right? Already there's a fight waiting to happen about where you allocate these resources and the whole bomber, mafia thing. Call them both. I switch it up sometimes just to throw people off. I think it's funny because that doesn't really matter at the end of the day. Not really. It's still the same thing. And you just take 1 second to explain it. It's fine. Yeah. So that's always an interesting study of different services and different, mindsets and what people think is important. And then you have people discussing it now and what they think is important with hindsight and what those people at the time were thinking. And most of the people don't even know because they don't do primary research. They watch a documentary or a book, read one book, and then they pretend to be an expert, which is neither here nor there. But I see that a lot. So it's interesting and how this always goes. But people just leave the context out, which is massively important. Context is everything, which gets forgotten. But yeah, so it's another fascinating one. Mm. Yeah, that's true. I don't know. I don't care. They're working on a Bolingbroke actually. I don't know if it's done or not. I haven't been in a while at the museum outside Hamilton. They were working on it. It was in pieces. It was in pieces when I was there last. The fuselage was looking a little holy, and not in the religious sense. It was missing most things, but they had a good chunk of money behind it. So I'm not sure where it's at yet. I do need to get back there. I've been there in years. Great museum if you're ever in the Toronto area. I recommend going there. That's where the Flying Lancaster is. Vera is there. They got the B-24. That's flight worthy. C-47. That's flight worthy. And a whole bunch of other things. The BCATP planes, the Chipmunk Harvard, which Harvard is one of my favorites, which I think is completely underrated, completely undervalued, and not discussed enough. The Harvard is amazing and has never gotten its due, and it really should. Also, it just looks cool and it looks funky, and I like that. Yeah, so they got those Chipmunk, Henson maybe. It's just that these things take a lot of maintenance, so I can't remember what's always flight worthy and what's not. And you can go in them. You have to pay, but you can go in them. Some of them aren't too bad. Like one's $200 something bucks to go in one of them. I think Norma's done one. Norma did in the C-47, I think. Yeah, that's one of them. I want to do the C-47 because it's not too expensive. It's one of their cheaper options. Or maybe the Harvard would be pretty cool. But anyway, yeah, it's that's kind of something I'd love to see. Yeah, Hamilton. And Vera's always well known when she's out flying around over Hamilton and Niagara Falls and all of that, because it does a big loop over the western end of Lake Ontario, which is right there, right? Yeah, it's expensive. I think it's almost $3,000 Canadian now, if not more, with the way fuel is going, because it's the fuel. The fuel is so expensive, right? And the maintenance of these older planes, obviously now that are almost 80 years old. Or I think Vera is 80 years old almost now. It's a lot. And these things saw service after the war as well, right? It's not like they were just sitting in mothballs. They were using them. So it just takes a lot of money to keep these things going. And that museum's all volunteers. It's wild what they're able to do there. It's great. Blackwatch Snipers. Yeah, I like it. I like it. I've had David O'Keefe on the channel to talk about it. I think it's his best. I think it's better than his DF book, in my opinion, because he knew those guys. He knew a good chunk of them. He was part of the Black Watch. He's the historian of the Black Watch, still, I believe. Yeah, he knew these guys that he was writing about. He has access to everything. And I've been to the ground where he did it. The story is devastating, right, with what happens at Verrier Ridge. I did an extensive video on that. If you haven't seen that yet, I would highly recommend checking it out, because the ground is not typically what people think it is. And I think that's why his book is good in that sense. He talks about what the ground looks like, and he gives good indications of that. And Verrier Ridge is hardly a ridge. It's like a rolling hill. It's big, but it's not as big as it seems. Germans were just dug in there really well. I had an area of mining. Anyway, getting off the topic there a little bit, but yeah, I think it's his best book, that he was able to cover that in its detail, how, the Black Watch comes in later, right? They don't come in until July 44, thrown into a massive-ish, right? The push south of Caen. They're part of that right away, pretty much. They don't have much time to get acclimatized. And then Operation Springs right after that. And it's just a mess. Mostly, there's the Rileys of Royal Hamilton Light Infantry do well, relatively, for numerous reasons. Rockingham is one of them. I'm sure Norma would love to hear that if she was still here. But anyway, yeah, going up that part it's a disaster because of what happens. And Andreas is right. They have multiple Black Days. They have Black Friday, which is in the Sheld, and it's not even the big one in the Sheld. Well, it's big. The biggest casualties are lost there. You think their big day would be Verrier Ridge or the Causeway, for even psychological impact, but it's not. It's another day, which we talked about with him as well. So if you haven't seen those, I suggest checking them out. Yeah, they're longer because my live streams are longer, but that's how you get the information direct from the people, right? It's the best way to do it. Yeah, they had a lot of tough times. They kept getting bad assignments, and they just, because they're an older unit, they were well respected. They were seen as elite because of the service in the First World War. Even though hardly anybody who served in the First World War was part of, the Black Watch in the Second. And it just, there's all kinds of reasons why these things happen. But it's a fascinating story. It's a sad story. Going to the ground. There's a little bit marking it, not much. You have .67, another video I have where you see the whole area. If you ever go to Normandy, you got to go there. You won't understand the Canadian advance in Normandy, south of Caen, without going to .67. This is like, I know it's a minor, it seems minor. It's the big thing for Canada, though, right? Like, you want to see how Operation Totalized develops the way it does. Go there. It's not as, as famous as the other ones, right? The British and American sites, but which I wish it was. I wish these stories were all told in conjunction, but they're not. And that's like the marking of all of this area, especially. There's some small memorials here and there. Like in Ypres, there's one to the Black Watch. But that's even from the fighting from before all this. So yeah, it's great. You got to go there. You'll see so far. You see everything. You can see why it was important. It was fought over almost tooth and nail. It became pretty bloody. A lot of artillery duels. Yeah, it's a place that people really shouldn't go to understand why the Allied advance goes the way it does. It's not as easy as people make it sound. We'll close the gap, but you can see why when you go there, which most people who read in this stuff don't. And I know because I hear from them. And anyway, they talk about things that don't make any sense, or they think they have the way of telling their stories, but they just do it for commercial reasons. Anyway, I don't want to go on with that. Yeah, the costs are really high for these old bombers. Just because running them is a pain, and they're really costly to run. Fuel is expensive. Parts it's not like they're making them anymore. Well, people are, but yeah. It is fascinating when you put say like in the Canadian Aviation and Space Museum, also here in Ottawa, which I should go back to also and show everybody with a video or something. The Lancaster at one point used to be near the CF-18, and you're like, those are surprisingly close in size. Like it's wild. Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah. I have no idea. Sorry, I have no clue. I haven't had paper money in months. I don't use them. I don't use stamps. I have old stamps that are still they're what are they? The forever stamps are permanent here in Canada. So no idea. And we have stamps of everything. It's not just the monarch. We have them for everything. So I don't know. I have no idea. Don't use any of them really. Yeah, I mean, they're given a lot of the the tough assignments because of a reputation. A lot of it has to do with brigade issues, brigade commanders, objectives given on up from division. But yeah, they kept getting walloped. Certain units are the same, right? Have the same sort of experience. The HLI, which I did a video on their entire war, kept getting tough assignment after tough assignment as well. They kept getting walloped. There's always seemed to be, certain units were always taking the brunt of things. Why? Some of them I don't know. It's hard to say, especially because commanders changed, right? Brigade commanders changed throughout the war, and yeah, it's absolutely wild how that can all go. But yeah, it's something I have looked at, but I can't give a definitive answer or really thoughts behind, because you really have to get into the tiny details of each battalion. Like, how did the battalion commander get along with the brigade commander? That changes with every person. So you know what I mean. So anyway. Yeah, that too, right? Very the roads and issues with getting lost, which happens frequently, especially in all that dust, which is something that's also not discussed at length. That was an interesting part of the video I did on Worthington Force. When I was there, a truck kind of went off the road a little. Well, I don't know, lorries, I guess you would call it. Here, it's a transport truck looking thing, trailer on the back. It kind of went off the road and it kicked dirt all over the place. You couldn't see anything anymore on that chunk of the road. So imagine an entire armored regiment moving down the same road. Of course, you can't see a goddamn thing, especially at nighttime. And people are like, "Oh, they get lost," or "How would you get lost?" I'm like, "Yeah, because you have a GPS. They didn't." So it's just another thing people don't really seem to understand. But this is why I think our understanding of these things sometimes suffers, because people can't get their heads out of the modern way of thinking. Wow, half an hour, 3,500 pounds. Wow. The Lancaster flight is roughly, well, it's 3K Canadian, I think. They may have bumped it again. It's over an hour. Like, you go to Niagara Falls and back, they're not that close to each other. That's wild. That is extremely expensive. Particularly, yeah, I guess that's an experience for the really rich or those who have saved over decades, I guess, which I am neither. Yeah, definitely not at the time, but yeah. For 1 second here. Any more questions? I can hang around for a little bit. Yeah, any more questions, fire away. I'll give it a minute or two. But yeah, no, it's been a great discussion to kick off 2025. Great community. You guys are awesome. Love getting to talk to you guys whenever we can. Different stuff. I'm going to start talking to some people about some live streams coming up. I've had some people who want to be on the channel. Some stuff coming out into the new year. Having some stuff looking at Operation Veritable, which I'm really looking forward to, because I think that's an underserved campaign in terms of what's produced and looked at, because it's important, right? Ripping through the Rhineland like that is hugely important, and it's tough, extremely tough fighting. It's still not the easiest area to get around in today. I mean, it's just lots of mud in the spring. Because it's just pretty wet because it's so low lying, just like the Netherlands, which is right next door. Yeah, anyway, it's fascinating. Yeah, I don't know much. Unfortunately, I really don't, because there's some, but not really many. I know someone who was doing work on this. I forget her name off the top of my head. I can look and maybe leave it as a comment on here after. I'll have to find it. But yeah, someone's doing some work on that. I don't know if it's post-war only. It could be misremembering. But anyway, no, unfortunately, I don't know too much. Lately, I've just been looking at a lot of Corvette stuff, because there is a story I do want to tell. The guy who ends up taking the German submarine naked, Hal Lawrence. That is a great name. That's a great story. He ends up naked on the deck, gets into the conning tower with a pistol and a hat, I think, left, and gets in. And he shoots 2 guys in the conning tower, gets in. It's a crazy story. And he wrote a ton of books, too, on the Royal Canadian Navy, which is amazing. Anyway, that's a great story, and I am going to do a video on that. I need to find a few extra things I'm looking for sources on that one. But sorry, that's kind of been my focus lately, has been the Corvettes. But yeah, not too much. Yeah, that's another story that I understand the context. That's it. Sorry, I'm going back here. Sorry, I'll get back. Yeah, that's the name, Julie Ferguson. So it might be post-war, but she might be doing stuff on Submariners separately. She was on social media. I can't say if she still is. I think that's it, though. That sounds very familiar. I haven't talked to her in a very long time now. I think that's it. I don't know if she's doing World War II specific stuff. She probably is, because people tend to work on more than one thing. But yeah, so yeah, it's an area that is definitely worth looking at in some ways. Where was I going with this? Oh yes, the Japanese American or the Japanese Canadian experience, which was, I can understand why in the context of the time they did what they did. Doesn't make it right. It also doesn't make it a good decision. The Canadians did something similar. Wasn't the same. It wasn't people behind barbed wire, I guess that's what I'm trying to say. which is what happened in America in a lot of cases, right? Like they said you have to get out of this particular strip of lands, a couple of 100 kilometers of the BC coast. So that basically left Alberta, eastern BC, and people just kind of went wherever they could. Losing businesses they'd built over generations, right? That happened in the States too. It's just there was no plans of anybody anywhere to do anything to help the Japanese. Also, what could they have done much to help the Japanese who weren't coming anyway? Right? I know there's the panic around Pearl Harbor. I get it. Pearl Harbor was very much a one-off, as we saw, right? So, wild. In Canada, they shell a lighthouse and miss. That's it. And a couple balloon bombs that kill no one. Don't even burn forests, really. They just kind of crash and do nothing. I mean, obviously we know this now, but, there was no, and they said that at the time too, right? So this isn't just hindsight saying that. The RCMP did an investigation and said, we found nothing. The federal government still did it. Some think it's mostly because of the American pressure. I don't, because there's no evidence really of that. It's more domestic pressure, right? There was huge racism in BC towards people of, non-white descent. This goes from people from South Asia and East Asia as well, right? That's a common thing in BC at the time. So it's to appeal people in British Columbia, right? Oh, well, they've been kind of clamoring for getting them out of here to begin with. And King, it's one of the stains on his reputation is that. And I am not going to hide that one. I do think he still is Canadian's best prime minister or best politician because of what he was able to do, but he still did stupid things that were wrong. It was a mistake, and it's something that the government literally paid for in the 90s. And it was controversial for a fair number of reasons, most of which I don't agree with. But yeah, there has been some work done on comparison, but very little. There is some work done on the Japanese-Canadian experience, or those who are forced through this. I mean, the whole idea of just calling them Japanese Canadians is also problematic because they were just Canadians. They were moving citizens as part of this, like multi-generation citizens. Some were even sent back to Japan. So it's a mess. It was a mess. It's left a black mark all over the place. So it's still something we're kind of dealing with, and it's really caused all kinds of damage and did damage then. It was dumb. So stupid thing to do. I get the context, but it doesn't mean it was still right. I can separate those things. Yeah, so it's a whole other thing. And it was just this hysteria that took over, and Canada just went along with it. It was a lot of people, a lot of lives were ruined. A lot of people, it took them a long time to get back to where they were. Some people are thriving now, like, David Suzuki's not on TV anymore, but he was moved as a result. His family was. A bunch of my aunts and uncles went to high school with him. That's why I know that's because London, Ontario was not known as a hotbed of racial integration at the time, in the 1960s. So anyway, it's really interesting. But yeah, another Japanese Canadian from Kamloops, British Columbia. That's why they call him the Kamloops Kid. Kind of annoying. I'm interested what you mean, two different versions about him. I'm not sure what that means. If you could tell me, please do. Yeah, I'd like to. Sorry, I'll get back to your question in a second. But yeah, those are places I'd like to visit too, just because I've done some research on them and I've done some work. At my previous MA, I did quite a bit of looking on the Japanese American internment and all of that, and the horrible experiences and what it did to those communities, and not just of those of Japanese descent too, right? And it had wide-ranging impact for hysteria. So for those who might not know about him, he was born to Japanese immigrants in Kamloops, British Columbia. That's where he lived. He went he didn't go back. He went to Japan, 30-something, 36, 33. I can't remember exactly. Sometime in the 30s, maybe mid-30s, for school, to go to like university or something. And is there when the war breaks out in China. So he joins the Japanese Imperial Army. I think he's Army or Navy. He obviously speaks perfect English, living in Kamloops, British Columbia. So he learns English, and they use him to be a camp guard in Hong Kong. So he treated the Canadians poorly, and I can see her here. The different versions here, and I'll get to that in a second. I'll just leave that out. He was not just the translator. That's not true. We have numerous accounts from non-Canadians as well of his brutality. And I'm talking about from Japanese, Korean guards, from Brits who were prisoners. The Canadians called him the Kamloops Kid. That's why we know this, because the British called him Slap Happy. They didn't call him Kamloops Kid because they don't know what Kamloops is. So the British called him Slap Happy because he would just beat people for no reason. I mean, a lot of the other guards did it too, because I've been going through those papers as well recently. They're just brutal for brutality's sake. And in my opinion, only he did deserve the death penalty that he received. One of the few that Canada actually gave out. He was not a good person. I mean, it's not justifying his actions because I don't ever do that. I can understand him growing up and where he grew up at the time he grew up, of why it would have been awful. What he would have been subjected to would have been awful. Just plain awful. I get that. I do. But other people did, and they didn't turn into sadistic torturers and murderers. So, I mean, he's not a figure deserving of sympathy, in my opinion, in that sense. I mean, I like to think of his childhood in that sense of learning what was done wrong, how we can learn to not do that anymore and stop treating people poorly, because this is where another place it ends up. But him as an individual, he deserved the death sentence. They initially got him on war crimes when they got him, but you can't charge your own citizens, because he wasn't a Japanese citizen. He was charged with war crimes. You can't charge your own people with war crimes against your own people. So they got him on treason, and they hung him. That's one of the few, actually, that Canadians actually executed. And that goes for the Germans, too, which is a whole other thing. But yeah, that's my understanding, and I've looked at the primary documents. I'm not talking about things written after the war either. I'm talking about journals that made it through the camps, survived the war, held in my hands, read them at the Canadian War Museum, and seen this guy mentioned. They don't have his name. They just call him Kamloops Kid. There's drawings of him beating people. So yeah, he was bad. And he admitted it too when they caught him. So I'm not sure which thesis, because I know there's a book out on him that came out recently or is coming out. I can't remember. I'm not sure which one you're talking about. If you had the title, I'd love to hear it. But yeah, it's a story of what can happen when people are treated poorly and racism was allowed to control everything, and how that ends up, and then how the POWs are treated, and those that literally die because of his actions. He's found guilty of 2 direct murders, I believe. Could be more. Yeah, it went on for a long time. He did a lot of damage, hurt a lot of people. So no, I don't think he's a figure of sympathy in the slightest. But he is someone I should look at and do a video on as well, because it's a fascinating story. Yeah, that's the book. I think. I'm not sure if I don't know what angle it takes. I'm not sure if it's sympathetic or not. I just honestly haven't had time to look at it yet. 2024 ended on me real fast. Yeah, and yes, you're right, Jay. It goes beyond the war. It goes back to the 19th century when they start to people of East Asian immigrants come to help work on the railroads in both countries, and some even before that. So it goes on. It's a long history of that, a long bloody history, race riots, and this includes Canada. Numerous race riots in places like Vancouver, Victoria. These places of seen as maritime tranquility now were places of very, very much of hatred, and a lot of work is being done to fix that, and it's a good thing. It's just it had to come to this violence for that to happen, which I detest. Anyway, so yeah, Kano Inouye, done a ton of work on him because of my current work I'm doing in my dissertation and thesis, unjust execution case So I'm assuming it's the setting of that book then, because it sounds the same. But yeah, he was bad. And this is not a campaign because he's the only one. If it was pure racism, why not hang them all? They didn't. They let them go. Some of them, they just let them go. Some were justifiably let go as well. Some of the POW, because I was just reading about this. Some of the I can't remember his name. I should find it. It was in Japan. I should find that again. I think I took a picture of it. In Japan, he was working at one. It was either a factory or a shipyard. He was in charge of watching the POWs. He let them go do things. He gave them food. He made them give them rest. He was captured, quote unquote, after the war, because this is in Tokyo, I believe, or it's in Yokohama, which is Tokyo area. They wrote a letter to the high command saying, "Let this guy go. He supported us. He didn't beat us. He helped us." They let him go. So, and a bunch of them only got like 2 years. Some of them got 10 years, which of course were reduced, just like the Germans. It's the same thing. It was bungled in that way too. Obviously, the Americans hung a lot more of the Japanese war criminals, killed a lot, executed a lot more of them. But the Canadians were involved in it too. A lot of these guys got, short prison sentences. So I'm not inclined to believe that thesis. And I know the evidence. I don't need to look at the evidence. I know the evidence because I've been literally looking at it because I'm trying to identify people from the units. I've seen it, and I did my dissertation on this topic. So I know the evidence, and I know that he was guilty. He deserved the death sentence that was carried out. And there was more that should have as well, but they were not executed for the crimes, which happened again with the Germans too, which I've done also quite a bit of work on. So other than that, I think we can wrap up. So thank you everyone for hanging out today on January 1st. Thank you so much. And thank you, Jay, for the super sticker and the support of the channel in various ways. It means a lot to have. Would like to end by saying, if you enjoy the work and the channel and you want to keep all this going in the way I do history and you enjoy it and you think it's justifiable, subscribe and like and all that stuff is very helpful. Patreon memberships, which are as low as $3.50 per month. You can get all kinds of access to all kinds of things. I've been doing quite a bit with that recently, but I'm going to aim to do even more and do some videos that are just for supporters. Just different things and things that I don't think are going to fit YouTube or online public consumption because of all the restrictions and censoring and everything that goes on. Not in a they're stopping me from talking about a kind of way of nobody wants to talk about blood and death and all that kind of stuff in the public sphere. That kind of stuff, censoring is what I'm talking about. So yeah, if you like the way I'm going about it, please help. A lot of you already are. I know that. So that's why I need to grow some audience. If you can tell people about this, my work, any of my videos, watching the videos is also extremely helpful because the more they get watched, the more they get recommended. Especially new ones are very helpful if you can do that. But yeah, Patreon's the best way to support me. It's the best that I get the biggest chunk of money. On YouTube, I get a lot less. They take a lot more on YouTube than they do on Patreon. And Patreon's just a better platform for sharing. I'm able to share a lot more with the patrons on Patreon than I can even the YouTube members. Anyway, so thank you, everyone. Please consider that. We may have some hard decisions to make coming soon in a few months as well. But hopefully not. We can just keep chugging ahead and use all these good ideas people were telling me today and some other stuff and see how the rest of 2025 goes. But enjoy the rest of your New Year's Day. Not sure what everyone's got looking for holidays and stuff, but I know your place is different. But hopefully some people get some more time off and can do whatever it is you do, enjoy with your time off. I will start reaching out to some people and keep everybody informed on live streams as soon as I can once things get figured out. So yeah, other than that, thanks everyone. Links down below for Patreon if you can check it out. Would be much appreciated. Other than that, have a good rest of your day, and I'll see everybody next time. Bye, everyone.